G'day, champions of chaos. It's AOS Coach, and we are here talking Slaves to Darkness. There is a new book. It's limited, but it's coming out soon. So if you didn't buy the special box, I don't know, it's coming out what? January, December? It's coming soon. But I'm here to talk about Slaves to Darkness, and this is a bit of a two-parter. First off, I have Archeon's #1 fan. It is the GW Open Best Overall winner, fresh from America. So fresh that I'm pretty sure this show is about to be cancelled because Phil slept in and woke up literally like seconds before we went live. But Phil also is a top performing Slaves player on the TSN network. Doing incredibly well last season, this season, and just an overall champion. What are you in the UK Worlds team for this upcoming season? Just slayer of all things order. But welcome, Big Phil.
Yeah, thank you very much, Coach. Looking forward to doing the show and talking about Slaves of Darkness, which has, like you say, got me into Team England this year, and hopefully can keep pushing Toby to take out rank 1 Slaves of Darkness player again.
Mate, you and Toby, and actually, funnily enough, I mentioned it's a two-parter. Toby's going to join us, and a little bit later on a different video, and we'll get some different opinions. We'll see what works, what doesn't work. And for anyone who's wondering, why am I doing 2 Slaves to Darkness videos so quickly? It's because it's such a deep book. It's such a rich book. It's like Cities of Sigmar that I think one video just doesn't do it justice. So I want to get Phil's thoughts, opinions, how he's thinking about the book, especially given that you are an Archeon fan. How do you build? How are you thinking about it? What do you like? Obviously, we are on the cusp of a new General's Handbook as well. So who knows how that's going to influence the meta. You know, yes, we'll talk GVs. We won't talk too much given it should hopefully end pretty soon. But Phil, welcome. What got you into Slaves? Why do we like this? Why are you a big fan? Give the internet the introduction, considering you've literally just won the GW Open. You are king of the hill.
I guess Slaves, best army in the game, right? What got me back into them? So I took a hiatus from the hobby for 15 years. So just before COVID, decided, right, let's do this again, and saw that Archeon model. It's pretty hard not to fall in love when you see the size of the big boy coming back from when he was riding his, in comparison, small little demonic mount. Archeon really brought me back in, and I haven't really looked back ever since. I think I played 30 GTs last year with him in the UK in my first competitive season ever. And he looked his future all the way into me having my worst result was a 4-1 with him. So it was pretty cool. But yeah, like I say, the model range, the lore. I strictly played Varangard when at the beginning it was all about Marauders, but the lore around Varangard and Archeon was just a big selling point for me.
Mate, you mentioned the old sculpt. I actually just pre-ordered the made to order Archeon. I'm like, ooh, you would be a cracking Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount if I want to go like a very Knights heavy build. If I don't want to go Kakadrak or Karkadrak, I thought that would be a great alternative model.
I've done literally the same thing. I got my brother to order it for me while I was in New Mexico, just in case I didn't have any Wi-Fi.
I got the boob snake as well. I bought the old Slaanesh boob snake. I'm on this cusp right now where I'm like, I want to play Khorne, but by the time I get my force up to Khorne, I'm pretty sure it's going to be changed. And the keyword shenanigans you can get with the Bloodstoker and the Bloodsecrator are going to change. But I do like the Slaves mark. So I'm like, boob snake, demonic lord. I'm all about that. It's such a great model.
Yeah, no, and like you say, all those buff pieces, I think we should make hay while the sun shines, right?
Yeah, if you got it already, Khorne at the moment is great. Look, I think we're getting into the weeds. Let's not get too deep just yet. Talk to me about the book. Okay, so you have been a long-term Slaves to Darkness player, do incredibly well. Like I said, you literally just won the GW Open with the best overall. You were best overall, right? You weren't best
Yeah,
general,
that's
you were best
correct.
overall.
Yeah.
So you've won it with Slaves. You're very, very intimate with Slaves. How have you found the new book? Like, what's the elevator pitch so far?
Personally, I've really enjoyed it. Like, I haven't been too clouded in judgment. I knew we're losing everything that made us so strong this year. I knew rerolls of ones of saves were going to go. I knew all the rerolls to hits and wounds were going to go. So I knew it was going to be a different way of playing, and I was really looking forward to that. What I feel from the new book is now where we probably lack a little bit more survivability. We now hit so much harder. So there's a lot more options in the book with how you build to do damage. Um, and it massively suits the way I like to play the game. I like to get up in my opponent's face and put as much pressure on them as possible to make mistakes. And I think this book really leans into that with the speed of it now. And like I mentioned, the damage, there's a lot more units you can pick from to really put pressure on. So I'm looking forward to using some models that I'd never even considered using before. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
I think that's how I felt like when I went through the book, because I'm like 2023, I'm super inspired to do at least a 2,000 point army of Slaves to Darkness. And like, I'm hoping that my ambition continues through, considering Gits is coming, literally just been announced. I'm like, man, my heart's in Gits. But luckily for me, most of my Gits army is painted already, so I can just play it without painting. But I know when I've been looking at this book, I've struggled. I've struggled a lot because I don't know the list. Chosen are really cool. Knights are cool. Chaos Warriors are cool. Cultists are cool. I'm going through and I'm like, there's a lot of competitive builds. I could go the new Ogreoid models. I could do some stuff for like, there's so many alternative builds that I'm like, I don't know where to start, which is probably very exciting because it means that it's not like here's one list, everyone spams the Splintered Fang. Spoiler, you can do that. But like there's a
Yeah.
lot of viability, and I'm sure you've probably found it. There's a lot of glow ups where one unit doesn't particularly win, but there's a lot of great ways to build.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, like you say, the fact that you've got myself at the moment and Toby coming on in a few days, um, you'll probably see two very different opinions as well. Toby um, is a much more reactive player and likes to play the long game and survive. And um, I, like I say, I play a lot differently. I like the aggro builds, and I don't care if my stuff's squishy. Like if I'm doing damage and putting that pressure on, I'm all good. Um, but yeah, like you say, there are so many options. The amount of lists I've written, and I've played like 25 games already with the new book. Um, I'm still not decided. I think we've got some lists that we'll go through later on, and one of them would be if I had a tournament tomorrow. That's one I'd probably take at the moment. But like you say, I guess we'll go through that all a bit later.
So has the play style changed? Like, yes, you mentioned the rerolls have changed. You know, the Corn Demon print certainly has changed. But just as like a take a step back for a second, if I was an existing Slaves player, what have you noticed just as like a play style? Does it still play the way it used to play? I know for a fact, obviously, Legion of the First Prince has fundamentally changed. That's a chalk and cheese, two very different army builds. But outside of that, like if you want to run your Varangard type armies and have like your Varangard generals, if you want to run Archeon and friends, if you want to run, is it the same or is it like Nurgle where the Nurgle we used to know is now very different to the faster slow?
Yeah, I'd say it's very different. So we used to be the big bad boys of being on a 2-up re-rolling ones. So whenever people got to a table, their eyes would roll when you would tell them, especially in the current Kotet list, where once per game you could be +6 to your save, re-rolling ones. So unless you had mortal wounds, you didn't have a chance. Whereas now, like, you don't have that guaranteed survivability. There's not as much save stacking at all. So you're really relying on that one cast of Mystic Shield, that one all-out defense if you're really being conscious of trying to keep your unkillable things alive. Whereas now, I think it lends towards damage dealing. So where we don't have that survivability for as long as we did previous, what we do now is we should do a lot more damage over the course of the game to make up for that. Obviously, there are some like damned legions that will help you survive a bit longer. And I think where you used to see Archeon strictly in like Host of the Ever Chosen, I believe he has a much different home in Ravagers. So you'll hopefully see a lot of really cool lists being built around different legions.
And by the way, yes, absolutely, Craig. The stupid Ever Chosen Cup game shenanigans with the priority roll. I'm so glad that's gone. Although, actually, to be fair, well, it's funny you say that, Phil, because I got so good at reading my opponent. Every time they rolled that dice in the old cup to see who would get priority, I pick it every time. Like, I could read your body language. So I'm a little bit sad that's disappeared. I was like, it was good to pick it out. But at the same time, like when I really wanted the priority roll and it was guaranteed to my opponent, like it frustrated me a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think you'll see people roll it ever turn like at the top of a battle round now. Just that free information you give your opponent is way too beneficial to them. To let them know they're doubling you, I just don't think you'll see it. So, but it's a shame. I quite enjoyed it. Probably because it was the most powerful command ability in the game. So, yeah, I'm gonna miss that one.
So take a step back for a second and let's imagine I'm asking Santa Claus to buy me that chaos box, you know, the box with the Ogreoid, the Chosen, the new Demon Prince. Like imagine I'm new to Slaves for the first time. How would you describe it? You've mentioned some of the changes, right? The safe stacking that you used to have is a bit more offensive in its build. How would you describe Slaves to Darkness just as a faction?
With regards to the tabletop play, or just overall?
Yeah, just like you know, like if you and I were at a game store and you see, you know, I'm like, oh, pick this box. I'm like, oh yeah, this kind of looks cool.
Yeah,
Is
so
it
I'll describe it as a really durable army that will see out most games with your models that really pack a punch. They've also got some really cool sculpts for future like endeavors down the line. So to build the army out, you can go with the classic like all cavalry builds if you like that aesthetic on the tabletop. That again really strong at the moment in this book. Or you can go the pure foot slog of Chaos Warriors, which are the I guess the hallmark of what used to be Chaos. So to get them back on the tabletop is brilliant. And then you can even go down like a completely different route of, oh, I don't want all the armored guys. I'm going to take these hundreds and hundreds of cultists that are just going to go crazy and run down the table and do as much damage as possible. So I'd just say there's so many options from a building perspective of the list, but ultimately they're the coolest looking models as well. They've done themselves a real service by bringing out the new Chosen, and to make the sculpt so good, I'm really glad they've made their rules text equally as good.
Speak to me about some of the new models. I agree, by the way. The new Chosen are hot. The new Demon Prince, I think, is a lot better. I thought the old Demon Prince was goofy. I think I prefer the current Demon Prince without armor, though. And there's a lot of cool options. I saw actually Doom of Darkness, our friend of the channel, had put an Ogreoid head on the Demon Prince. And I thought that was really cool. Like it actually looked really, really cool. There's a lot of customization. I'm actually looking at Azazel, the old demon prince of Slaanesh. I'm gonna like, ooh, how do I bring on some of those old heroes into my slaves force? So but you had a whole bunch of new stuff, right? And maybe I'll get your elevator pitch. Give me like your high level thoughts, right? So We have a new hero in Eternus. So Eternus, the Blade of the First Prince. It's like the not the Green Knight. What's your take on Eternus?
Being an Archeon player and he's a Bellacor's servant, I'm probably never going to use him, purely from a lore perspective. But I really like the model. I think the sculpt is amazing. The War Scroll is quite good. It really does lean into playing with Legionaries and Be'lakor. And like I say, being the Archeon fanboy that I am, it really pains me to ever think of picking an army of Be'lakor in it over than Archeon. But yeah, Eternus as a model, as a sculpt, absolutely beautiful. And I think over the recent years, GW have done a stellar job with that. He does pack quite a bit of a punch, but I'm not sure I'd pick him up over certain other Chaos Lords on mounts. Like the Karkadrak has got an unbelievable glow up this year. The Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount as well. I think
I'll pause you on that because I want to. One of the next questions I want to ask you is the glow ups. Like, where has the glow ups been? But I think you're right. Like when I looked at Alternus, I'm like, he's not too bad. And then I thought for the points between Be'lakor and Alternus to get the improved comeback from the dead, I'm like, oh, it's a lot of points. I feel like I could spend those better points in more knights, more warriors, more cultists. A Chaos War Shrine. I'm like, oh, it's hard to justify.
No, it really is, and like you also then need some legionaries as well. And I think there's just better core units out there that you want to be picking up instead.
What about the Ogoroid Theridon? So that's the new Ogoroid troops. What was your initial thoughts on the Theridons?
Initial thoughts were they look like they can deal a serious amount of damage. Like I think you can get them up to damage 3, Ren 2, 4, 5 attacks each if they're in Khorne. My take on stuff, I'm a bit of a stickler for the way models look, and I personally they're not for me. So I won't ever put them on a tabletop because I like playing with what I think looks cool. However, I know someone's got 18 of them already, and they're really going all in on this unit. That they're a little squishy with their 5-up save, but if you can't take them off the table, they're going to take you off the table. But yeah, like I refused to play Marauders last year when they're really good, just because I was like, these models look rubbish. So
the poor old 6th edition Marauders. I'm still surprised they're around. I thought they were building out these Warcry models to eventually get rid of the Marauders. By the way, they got a bit of a nerf. They lost the little charge shenanigans they used to have. So I'm like, it's not really a lot of good reasons to take the old cultist.
No, and they're also not one of the. Well, there's other cheaper battle line options as well if you're just going to fill it out, which are just better as well. But yeah, I thought Marauders were going to get new models for this book as well because I'm like they're so old, but apparently not. So
no, I thought the cultists would eventually replace them. To be honest with you, I'm like they've had their time. There's a lot of cool cultists now available, and it gives you a bit more customization, which leads me to the question I wanted to ask you, which was the glow ups. So when I was going through the book, I was going through and, looking at every little war scroll, every little change and trying to understand what's different, what's improved, what's gone backwards, what's something that maybe in the old book you never really saw on the tabletop that now is worth considering. Have you noticed any of those gems? Anything that maybe you never played previously? You're like, oh, actually, there's some new rules and it's worth my time now.
yeah, so I guess I'll put 2 together off the bat, which are the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak and the Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount. Particularly their War Scroll ability, right, for always strike first on the charge, and then the ability to allow a unit wholly within 12 to be selected immediately. I think the points alone for that, if you're really going into like a knights build, to be able to strike first with your hero, strike with 10 knights, then strike with 10 knights again, unless your opponent has a strike first effect. You're gonna be clearing serious amounts of people's armies with that one ability, if you can time it right and get into the core of them. If you have the points, I'd always go Karkadrak over the Chaos Lord and Demonic Mount, purely from a damage output perspective. Like, he will kill so much, and with the new Eye of the Gods, like, he could have more rules than Archeon does by the end of the game if you do it all properly. And I think, like I say, it's so nice to be able to use these models. Like, I had a Karkadrak from when I bought the Start Collecting box when it came out, and never built it because the rules just didn't justify my time to build and paint it. So to actually have that as one of the like fundamental pieces in some armies now is amazing. Same as the Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount. It means I'll actually get to use Archeon in my army when that made to order guy turns up. So I'll still have a little piece of Archeon with me even when he's not in my list.
While we're talking Archeon, by the way, yes, comment in the chat. This is an early video, so there is no FAQ formally. At the time of recording, there has been some minor clarification. So, for example, the host of the Ever Chosen is a 5-up rally, not a 4-up rally. So in the book, in the English version, your Chaos Warriors, your Chaos Knights rally on a 4-up. That was already errated, but there's going to be hopefully other erratas. So there's some things that we might talk about that might get changed. You know, Splintered Fang right now is a perfect example of a unit that is either needs to be changed in its war scroll or needs to have a points increase. And yes, they are no Noblars, but certainly, you know, there's a couple of standouts where it's like, let's see how you go. And I mentioned right at the top of the channel, at the show, the Blood Stoker and the Blood Secretor. There's a little bit of cheese right now that if you look at the old Slaves to Darkness allies, so your Khorne, Slaanesh, Nurgle, and Tzeentch, all your Tzeentch war scrolls have changed from Tzeentch keyword to be what's it called? Disciples of Tzeentch. Your Slaanesh are often hosts of Hedonites of Slaanesh, and your Nurgle's Maggotkin of Nurgle. But when you look into the Khorne war scrolls, a lot of their war scrolls are Khorne keyword, not Blades of Khorne, which then adds some cheeky shenanigans at the moment with Slaves to Darkness. And as I mentioned, the Mr. Whippy, the Blood Secretor, just two examples of where Khorne already is a strong build, and some of those allies could just make them even better. So enjoy it while you can, but know that there might be some things that will get changed. Phil, is there anything you'd add to that, or anything that you're thinking about when it comes to like that cheekiness?
Yeah, so with regards to the cheekiness, I completely agree with you. Khorne at the moment is by far the standout, and as I alluded to earlier, make hay while the sun shines. It's not going to be around forever. I think as soon as that new Blaze of Khorne book drops, we're going to lose all these inbuilt pieces to allow us to get +4 attacks and +3 to run and charge, etc.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, Phil, because I started building Slaanesh. I'm like, I want to build around Slaanesh in this book, and then I kept looking at Slaanesh versus Khorne. And by the way, Ramon mentioning earlier, we'll talk a little bit about elevator and like high level stuff, and we will get into the rules soon. I swear I'll bring up the Eyes of the Gods table, bring up the marks. We'll get into the weeds, but it was really hard for me because I'm building Slaanesh. And I just kept looking over the fence, and I'm like, Khorne's just better. And then I went looking over to go, right, let's look at like some of the allies and what could possibly do even better. Because coalition has changed. There's no coalition anymore. It's now just allies. And I'm like, Khorne at the moment just has so many good kind of internal synergies that makes that mark of Khorne so much better.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. What I've tried to do with my list building is try and remember that this isn't forever. So I've been playing a lot more other options. So Again, you'll see later on one of my lists isn't Khorne with the splintered fang that everyone keeps going on about. So
Literally here, Archeon with
yeah,
Splintered Fang, like this fight on death stuff, and it's going to definitely be FAQ'd in some description. So enjoy it while it lasts. But like I was talking to some mates, they're like, "I'm going to buy 90 Splintered Fang." I'm like, "You're asking for trouble. If you don't
yeah,
already own this, you are asking for trouble."
yeah. I think well, I may be biased because I'm a Slaves player and I want Slaves to be good, but I think there's a lot of build up over Splintered Fang that's probably a bit unnecessary. Yeah, they are 3 attacks each, 4s and 2s, mortal wounds on 6s, etc. So I think people are trying to get in as many attacks as possible with Khorne, which means you lose a lot when you're trying to build all of that in with them. Ultimately, they are a 5-up save, 1 wound each, 6-inch movement. You can keep out of their ranges for a couple of turns.
The Snake
So
Charmer does bring them back to life, though, and you can fight on
yeah,
deaths. And like for the point value of the Splintered Fang, it's a little bit too good. Just
yeah,
like Noblars at the moment, it's like you get 20 wounds for 100 points, a bunch of mortal wounds on a 4-up. You're like, you're a little bit too cheap.
yeah. Um, Yeah, and I guess the fight on death, you need to invest 860 points in Archeon. So, which I am not afraid to do in the slightest to double your output.
So talk to me while we're talking glow ups and we talk Archeon, right? Because Archeon got 5 extra wounds, but he got some pretty powerful rules. You can't do rally or inspiring presence within 12 inches. The 3 heads on Drogar have changed a little bit. What's your thoughts on new Archeon? His points didn't change, I thought, which was really interesting, right? He's got a ward. He's got a 5-up ward
Yeah,
now.
yeah, 5-up ward now.
And 20
I
and
guess
25 wounds. So like straight away, you're looking at
yeah,
like a 30-35 wound model.
yeah. I think for me, I love his new war scroll. I think he's got everything on there that I'd want him to have. Like we've got the once per game ability of the cup, as you alluded to, the built-in 12-inch aura of knowing Spirants or Rally really sends like his damage output to another level, um, along with the rest of your army. Because 12 inches when you're in the middle of things is huge off a 6.5-inch base, and I believe it's just a within aura. It's not a wholly within, or it might be wholly within. I'd need to double check, but
You keep talking. I'll check. I'll check. I'll
um,
check.
I feel like he's going to play a much different role this year. I inherently had him as an 860 point buff piece that was able to give reroll ones of all hits and wounds to a unit with the by my will. Um, Now he needs to be that damage dealer, so he needs to be in amongst it, doing lots of damage. All the time he can't fight twice anymore. Um, his damage is actually quite consistent now, with the D6 damage going to flat 5 on the
Yes,
heads.
the monstrous clawed going to flat 5
Yeah,
is so good, considering like the having a D6 is just, it spikes. And you've
yeah,
still got Slayer of Kings as well, which is great as well. And the heads I thought were interesting, right? Because the 3-headed Titan has gone from a hero phase ability to a monstrous rampage. And I think for me, like when I was looking at Arcane, I'm like, I love is it the Spell Eater that does no, it's not Spell Eater. I'm thinking of something else. All 3 of them I thought were definitely curious, but does mean that you lose the generic monstrous rampage, like Titanic Jewel or Stomp or whatever.
yeah. I think situationally the Nurgle one could be brilliant. The 7 dice on a 3-up to immortal to hordes, just because you don't really need to roar a horde unit with Archeon. Like he's got enough Ren just to smash through them. So any additional damage you can get through, I think, is really beneficial for him, rather than having him just get tied up by stuff.
He
Especially with that inbuilt command ability, that
he's
inbuilt ability of no inspiring.
Does he still fight? He doesn't fight twice, because was that
Chaos
Reapers of
Lord.
Vengeance? No, that was yeah, Chaos Lord. I remember like there was a
Yeah,
couple of ways that he could fight twice.
Yeah, so I'm pretty certain you can't get into fight twice anymore. You definitely can't within the Slaves of Darkness book. I'm not sure if there's another way you can get into fight twice.
Reapers? Did Reapers of Vengeance, the old Corn
I think
sub
that
faction?
changed to demons only, maybe.
Okay.
I played against I've forgotten his name. A guy in New Mexico that runs Old Town Throwdown.
Oh,
So
Gareth.
yeah, Gareth. And he's a strictly Corn player, and I had the joy of all his demons fighting twice. Which, when you've got Scarbrand sat there and you're scared of mortal wounds, it wasn't a lot of fun.
So I'm hearing Archeon is good. Chaos Chosen, I thought got a really nice glow up. They're now 3 wounds apiece. They're a lot more. Their points went up. They went up massively to over 200 points, but they feel the elite. They feel much more like elite warriors, where previously they were like pseudo chaos warriors. But like there wasn't a lot of difference between the two.
Yeah, I really like the Chosen. I think there's a lot of play with them and lean into many different play styles with them as well. So I know we're going to the rules a bit later, but you can put various banners on these boys, and they're gonna do a job for you. The fight twice ability, mortal wounds on 6s, they do everything you want them to do. You just need to work out how you're going to get them there. So,
all right, I'll bring up the rules in a second, but before I do that, I do want to ask you, is there anything that maybe you think you're now not a fan of? Things that you used to feature? There's a couple that I've got that I'm like, they used to be good, but you can have a holiday for a little bit.
yeah, so I guess the Chaos Lord, for one, he was a fundamental piece in my army for over a year.
On
Yeah, on
foot?
foot, on foot. Um, I paid the points purely to make Archeon cost 975 because Archeon fighting twice was so powerful. He's now lost that ability, and I believe it now allows his retinue to fight, which for me I'm not too bothered about. So he's gone. He's going to go and sit on the haystack while the rest of my boys have some fun. Other units, probably I didn't personally use them, but it'd be Marauders, like you said earlier. They used to pack so much of a punch that changing that lowest dice to a 6, I think you had like a 99% success rate at charging 9+ inches. So with a reroll. In terms
Here's a
of other
couple that
units, yeah,
I had, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree. The kitty cat, the mind stealer, Sphyrax,
yeah,
whatever the cat is. Its gaze now has changed. It's now a bravery test, and there's a lot of bravery 10. I'm like, nah, I'm not a fan of you. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
completely agree. Long time user of it as well, so it's going to be a shame to lose it. I think it's only good into destruction now. Really, all other factions probably just have too high a bravery to even warrant the dice roll of it.
Orders are 50-50. You still got
Yeah,
cities. Stormcast is still not that great in its bravery. So you've still got even Sylvaneth to a degree. But like there's too much chaos and there's too much death at the moment. It's like,
yeah.
I don't
I
like the
think it lost the
consistency.
monster keyword as well.
I did it.
I think it did. Yeah, I heard someone
Yeah.
talking about it this
Yeah.
weekend.
Anthony Brennan also mentioning it's lost the monster keyword. Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, so like I have it. Well, I've been running it in the Kotet list purely for raw sometimes. So just to get off the ability to raw someone. So now to lose that as well. So now it only counts as 2 on an objective instead of 5. You can't raw things if you really need them to stop all out defense. But yeah, like I enjoyed the dice game. I enjoyed that it was immortal. So you used to be able to Mask of Darkness it down the table, get it to where it needs to be, make something fight last, go in and double tap it with Varangard or Archeon, and yeah, I'm gonna miss it into the new Mega Gargants, that's for sure, with the Gatebreaker on a 4 up doing 4d6 mortals.
I won't, because the other day I played my Mega Gargant into a Storm Drake. Feel you'll like this one. The Mega Gargant, the Gatebreaker, now has an ability where you can sacrifice its attacks, and on a 4-up, you do 4d6 mortal wounds. I did 20 mortal wounds to a Star Drake. Like, so chuffed. And I Colossal Slammed as well. Like, I slammed him good.
Yeah, I had the joys of finding out that rule on Saturday in my game 8 till midnight with L to go into day 2 of New Mexico. And I was like, okay, I know how to beat Gargants. We're just going to save stack my Vanguard, put them on +4 to their save, reroll hits and wounds, and I'm going to charge all 4 of them. I was like, cool, I'm in. Took off his general, and then he went, okay, I'm going to sacrifice all my attacks. I was like, oh, what does that do then? And like you say, you alluded
It's a
to
4-up. It's a 4-up. Like, it's a 50-50. If you
Yeah.
roll that 1 to 3, you do literally no attack. So it's like, it's such a Gargant thing, and yes, you can suplex a kitty cat. 2 other things, Phil, that I thought 2.5. I want to say 2.5. Khorne Demon Prince, you used to use it all the time for the reduction of the charge and the run. Khorne Demon Prince has fundamentally changed, so I think that now is no longer an auto include. Agree or disagree?
No, I completely agree. I think you're taking Nurgle one now if you're taking one.
Nurgle.
Yeah, Nurgle. Yeah, it's nice. Different things are getting their time in the sun again, so you're not just going to see Tzeentch on the table. I'd be very surprised if you see any, but
yeah, Tzeentch was the mark that I thought was the least good. I'm going,
yeah,
okay, I can see Nurgle, I can see Khorne, I can see Slaanesh, but then the gap between those 3 and then Tzeentch, I'm like,
yeah,
I don't think I'd ever run Tzeentch.
It's pretty night and day. But again, it's a good thing. It's allowing different options, opposed to fundamentally being a one-mark book. So it'd be nice to see the way different people interpret it and see a lot of different lists. Like you alluded to, we're probably the second biggest book in the whole range behind Stormcast. So it'd be nice to see all the different builds while people are understanding the new book and how to decipher the way in which it's trying to play the game.
The other 2 or 1.5 I mentioned, Legion of the First Prince. That was a faction that people love to kind of like bring that soup demon build. That's completely disappeared. You've still got Legion of the First Prince as a sub faction, but it's no longer about that demon soup. And you kind of already noticed the demons were going. Their allegiance ability was kind of the War Scroll abilities were tied to allegiance ability. So if they were being brought into slave / legion, like your discussing resilience, Kairos had some changes with his cheaty dice. Again, agree or disagree?
Completely agree. You only have 400 points to play with now, I think, and you just can't get enough in to make it worthwhile. If you want to run Bellicor, there's just better options from a Legion perspective that you can put him into without having your 400 points of demons that aren't going to do anything. By the time you put 10 horrors in, like, it's game over from an ally perspective.
The last one that is my half a change. And you tell me what you think about this one. Not the war altar, your chariot, what's it called? The stupid the
war
the
shrine?
the war shrine. I keep going Cities of Sigmar, my war altars and things like that. And I say the shrine because the shrine with its prayer used to be able to jump between its marks. So you'd be able to have a bit more flexibility with the especially if you're doing 2 marks in your army. Now your shrine is marked. So if you pick Khorne, you can only do Khorne. And if you do 2 marks in your army, you're going to need 2 shrines, or it's only going to buff half your army. Thoughts on that one?
I think its rules text has got significantly worse. I used to love any of the prayers, basically. Obviously, in the lists I've been running in Tzeentch, the ability to pray to Undivided instead and get all the benefits from that if you already had enough of your save stacking. It has come down to its original points back at 185, I believe. But it's a lot of points to really buy into what you want to try and do with it. So I think if you're thinking Slaanesh, then it would be on my piece of paper with a question mark if I can fit it in. Particularly in like a Ravagers build where that 6-up ward aura could be pretty big for you fundamentally against other playstyles that tend to be more difficult for you. But it definitely wouldn't be an auto include in my lists at the moment.
It depends on, like, as I've been thinking about the War Shrine, I've been thinking about if I go primarily one chaos mark, so I'm going all in on Nurgle, all in on Khorne, it makes a lot of sense. But for someone who
Yeah.
at the moment is doing 2 marks, whether it's Slaanesh and Nurgle or Khorne and Nurgle, or even Slaanesh and Khorne, it becomes a little bit hard. And I was thinking about the 6-up ward, and I'm like, the little sorcerer lords now, or even any of your sorcerer lords with the, is it oracular vision, instead of giving you +1 to your save, is now giving a 6-up ward. So if I really want a couple of wards, maybe I do 2 little sorcerers on foot rather than the War Shrine. And it's guaranteed. It's not a spell. It's not a dice roll. It's just you pick a unit, boom, you got a 6-up ward.
Yeah, I still think sorcerer lords are one of the key units in any slaves army, even with the changes to oracular visions and demonic power. I will always have a minimum 1, and in some lists I'll have 2 of them. But yeah, I agree. I think the prayers just aren't as good, and that the fact you've got a 33% chance at failing unless you're near mystical, it's a lot to buy into them. I like the Slaanesh one for delivery. If you're really going foot heavy, getting that 3d6 charge on them with run and charge can really help. And I think there's going to be some little shenanigans you can do, like getting levitate on Chosen, giving them run and charge them 3d6, hop over.
I'm thinking Sigvold. I'm thinking Sigvold with Slaanesh in the war, the altar. So I'm like, give Sigvold 3d6 and his charge roll, his unmodified charge roll is the amount of attacks. So I'm like, 205 points for Sigvold, who can tank an incarnate and do a whole bunch of damage. I'm like, this is not too bad.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think for me, if I'm thinking of running Slaanesh, it's on my list as can I fit it in, because it can give you a lot of utility which your army needs, which is the delivery of your models.
Look, we've talked a lot about rules, so how about I actually bring up some of the rules? And I'm conscious that it's already been 40 minutes, and I think this is why I need to do multiple shows, because this book, like Cities of Sigmar, I could do 5 shows and we'd still be scratching the surface of this book. So without looking at the rules, I assume people have either read the leaks, they've seen my videos in the past, or they can read the screen themselves. Talk to me a little bit about how you think about Slaves to Darkness. We'll skip Damn Legions for a second because we'll go to that at a future slide. But what are your thoughts when it comes to the Chaos marks? Do you think that all of them are equal? Do you think there are some better than others? Do you think you do an army with just 1 mark, 2 marks? Do you try to spread out the marks? Like, how do you, as an experienced, successful player, look at the marks of Chaos system?
So I guess while I'm looking at it, for me, there's 3 standouts. There's your Nurgle, your Khorne, and your Slaanesh. They for me are going to be the first ones that people are going to really lean in on. I think every army is going to have a blob of Nurgle with the ensorcelled banner. That -1 to be wounded. There's not a lot of stuff in the game that can benefit your to wound. They reduce.
That's changed, by the way. That changed as well, right? It used to be an aura. Now it's just the unit.
Yeah, it just affects them. And I believe your opponents can get out of it with shenanigans if they can string out the unit that's attacking them. So stuff like combat snakes. Like if they just want to go in and do their 15 mortal wounds, they can still get their rend through. But Yeah, I think big blobs of warriors in Nurgle with a banner is going to be pretty common for people. Khorne, again, that +1 attack on the charge. I think there's going to be a lot of cavalry units that will lean into the Khorne route because everyone knows horses are more punchy when they get a charge off. So why not give them extra attacks while they're doing it as well? And then Slaanesh, again, giving the ability to run and charge will really help with the delivery of models that are significantly slower. I think on the current boards, I think most of the missions you start 18 inches away. So I don't feel you definitely need run and charge at the moment on the cavalry. But let's see what the new GHB brings, and it could be a sub faction that you see takes over Khorne in the new GHB, particularly when the Blazer Khorne book comes out as well.
I would agree wholeheartedly with you. Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh in some combination, I think, are your top three. Probably another thing to mention, folks, if you haven't looked at the book, is there's a new type of artifact, and it's called a banner. There's an ensorcelled banner, and you get one of them for free. And if you go host of the Ever Chosen, you get a second banner. Or obviously, if you go like Warlord or any other battalion that gives you an extra enhancement, that could be an extra banner. You can't stack the banners, so your unit of Chaos Knights, for example, couldn't have two banners, but you certainly could have two banners across your army. So we'll get to those banners very soon. They are very tasty. It reminds me of the old Warhammer Fantasy days where you had those battle standard bearers and you could pick a magical banner for your army. That, to me, is what drew me. I like Khorne, I like Nurgle, I like Slaanesh. Undivided is question mark, and we'll get to the Eyes of the Gods table in a minute. And there's some interesting kind of mechanics. To me, it's a little bit too random, especially as a tournament goer. But the Mark of Tzeentch, for me, the only thing I'm kind of drawn to is that Warp Reality. Getting the spell, casting value of 6, range of 9. If successfully cast, you can pick a Tzeentch Slaves to Darkness unit and basically teleport it around the board. Obviously outside of 9, but like to me, that's probably the only thing that I'm drawn to with the Tzeentch mark. Where are you
Yeah,
at?
I just don't like the spell either. Really, it's
Okay.
really situational. You have to teleport back to your wizard that's casting it. So where Mask of Darkness used to be, pick up the models wholly within 12 and then teleport anywhere. It's now pick up the models anywhere and teleport it back to be wholly within 9. So it's more of a recall spell. So for me, it's much more situational than what it used to be, and yeah, I just don't think compared to the other marks, it gives you what you want. The 6-up spell ignore is okay, but fundamentally now every unit in the book has a 5-up mortal wound ward basically on all your mortal chaos stuff. So your survivability to spell magic is a lot better. Yeah, you can still be affected by spells that obviously don't just deal damage to you, but when you only had a 1 in 6 chance now of ignoring it, I'd rather just go for a different option that's going to do you a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. It's a nice. I like it. It's a nice spell, but is it enough to pull me from Nurgle's Khorne or Slaanesh? I think the raw answer is no, especially because I'm going to need more units that are going to be Tzeentch marked, and it's not enough incentive to me. But again, who knows what the meta? It's okay, but I just think the other ones are a little bit stronger than the rest.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like you say, with the meta changes there, and we'll get to it in a bit, I'm sure the banner might be worth it for one unit.
I did ask you a second part to the question before we move from this particular page, and I said, as a experienced player, do you mark your whole army as one? Would you split up to two? Would you
Um,
do little trios of like having 3 different marks? Like, how do you see the mark system?
so at the moment, I am strictly a multi-mark person, especially with the um, different sub factions. If you can get 2 banners in, then really lean in on that. Like I say, I think that mark of Nurgle with the banner, I think, will just be in every army. Because you want that one unit to really tie up your opponent as a roadblock whilst you get the rest of your force there. And then the rest of your army will probably be centered around one of the other 2 marks in Slaanesh or Khorne.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the moment, definitely 2. I'm not sure I'd go into 3 currently. And I'm probably never going to be just 1 mark. I'm going to venture around and give the army what it needs. Just inherently waiting for the right opportunity to go in and do damage. You need something to hold your opponent there, and Nurgle leans into that so well. So definitely a mark of Nurgle.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. Most of my lists, because the points went up in so many different units, I find that I am restricted in points. So I am finding that I'm probably best building 2 lists, having, you know, the offensive and the defensive parts, or what people might know as the hammer and anvil. Having one really good anvil that can soak up damage, that can be really successful in defending, whether it is in Expert Conquerors, whether it's going to be the 5 up rally, whether it's going to be like lots of wounds. You know, I think I can see a lot of Nurgle type anvils, but then that offensive play will likely be in the Khorne or the Slaanesh side. And, you know, between Host or Knights of the Empty Throne, there's a lot of good options for an offensive. Even Ravagers got some good offensive plays too. We'll talk about that very shortly, but just like how I'm thinking about the marks is definitely 2. I tried a 3rd, and I'm like, I'm splitting my force too much. Maybe having like one hero that has a mark, or like a, you know, but I'm mostly 2.
Yeah, no, completely agree.
Jonathan's asked, would you ever go more than 3? I'm struggling to do 3. Like I think the question's better. Would you go more than 2? And I think at the moment I'm struggling to get outside of 2. I lose too many synergies.
No, exactly. Yeah, I for me, my head wouldn't even contemplate going more than 2 as a competitive player. I'd be going all in on 1 with that one big blob of you're going to struggle to take this off the table. With Nurgle.
Yeah, I agree. So you got a couple of other things. You have some new heroic actions. So you had the Pledge to the Dark Gods and the Drawn on Power. Is there anything you'd want to call out on these particular ones? So these are obviously for heroes that have the Eyes of the Gods. So you can either roll 3 dice instead of 2 when you roll on the Eyes of the Gods table, or one of them is you get to roll 3 dice instead of 2 when it comes to casting a spell. But if you roll a double 1, the miscast is a D6 instead of D3. So, I mean, 1 in 12. I mean, it's a pretty high unlikelihood of doing double 1, but it'll punish you if you do.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact there's a lot more utility around heroic actions now, and that you're getting away from just the core ones. With the new Eye of the Gods table, and a certain command trait or artifact with the Chaos Lords, you can really lean in on completing those actions to allow you to roll upon the Eye of the Gods table. So, in certain scenarios, the Pledge to the Dark Gods is going to be really strong, particularly if you combine it with, I believe, the artifact that makes models count as 0 if they have 1 or 2 wounds. So you just run onto their objective, grab it off them, roll on the Eye of the Gods, and if you're lucky, you've got a Demon Prince. If not, like your Karkadrak, roll a 6 on 3d6. I don't know, an 8, sorry, and you get +1 rend on everything. So the chances of you being able to really buff up those units and be guaranteed to do it, you're not having to kill anything. If you know they've got some expert conquerors on the objective, and you just run to be within 6, and you get a free roll on the Eye of the Gods table. I'd really lean into that and use that heroic action quite a bit. I don't really feel that the Slaves army is that CP heavy at the moment, so you can probably get away with using other heroic actions. Drawn to power. Oh, sorry, you're going to say something.
No. I agree with you. I think, and you know, I'm here. If you like the Eyes of the Gods table, I think it's definitely a very fun mechanic. And, you know, like, is it the most competitive of the sides? Well, I guess it depends on what you pull, right? If you can pull some of these really nice abilities, you know, as you mentioned, improve the rend characteristic of a melee weapon. You know, there's some really cool things. If you can get them at the right time, Eyes of the Gods is incredible. And there are some ways that you can get the Eyes of the Gods on your units as well. So Undivided, especially, a lot of cool fun. And as Warpstone Enjoyers also mentioned, you can get yourself some Demon Princes. Now, how many Demon Princes would you want to have? Look, 1, maybe 2, I guess, if you're going to be having a summoning pool. But I don't know.
Hopefully 0 spawn.
Yes, obviously, hopefully 0 spawn. And in the past, I think it was optional, right? You could just choose to. Now you must put the spawn down.
Yeah. I do like the Demon Prince thing as well, because potentially, situationally, you might not want the Demon Prince, and it allows you to then pick all the other options before it, and you can really use that utility.
I want to call out one comment before you jump into the Dawn on Power, because Jonathan's called out a really good comment, is that it's not limited to a single cast spell, right? So if you go Cabalist, you go into like a multi-cast wizard, getting 3d6 instead of 2d6, it's not bad. Not bad.
No, yeah, completely agree with him. Again, I really like it, and I think for that, the turn where you need your demonic speed to go off, or you have to have Mystic Shield, because Mystic Shield now is ultimately one of your most powerful spells. Now we've lost all our other ways of getting +1 to their save, so I think it's definitely risk versus reward is more in the reward favor. And let's say you do roll that elusive double 1 and you miscast, you've still got a 1 in 6 chance of it doing the d6, right? Doing the flat 6. So I'd like to think if I've rolled 2 1s, the 1s are going to keep on flowing, and it would just be the 1 damage. But yeah, I really like the ability, particularly as he alluded to the multicast and casting multiple spells on 3d6, and yeah, I think it's really powerful. And like I say, especially with demonic speed, I believe demonic speed went up to a casting value of 7 instead of a 6, which it was in the book with the errata.
We'll bring up the spell. We'll bring up the spells in a minute, and we can kind of call out our favorites. Yeah, absolutely. You know, Stefan, Master of Magic, also helps there if you want to get the reroll, or cogs as well. That's a great way to double down on draw to power. Morbid Angel asked, does Slaves have any coalition? So you used to have coalition, which meant that you could kind of bring in units that were like allies but not allies. And it would help you exceed your ally points. That's now been removed, which kind of surprised me a little bit. Stormcast have kept it. You've lost your coalition, so you must bring in just up to 400 points of your traditional allies.
Yeah,
Phil?
I just think Legion of the First Prince now is just not worth it. That 400 points, you don't get enough utility out of it to just take demons. So
we'll get to the sub factions in a minute, and we'll talk a bit about what we like and what we don't like. There's a couple of clear winners. Probably 3 out of the 6 are definitely probably my favorites. But do you have any favorite command traits at all on the table? Again, we're not going to read all out. This is not story time with Coach. Is there any particular command traits from the book, or are you going into more things like Master of Magic?
I think this is the rare time that you probably won't be taking Master of Magic a lot. Inherently, I've been known in the UK as having my wombo combo of Battle Reg, Arcane Magic, Arcane Tome, and Master of Magic, and that's been me. I probably get it in 90% of my lists. Whereas now, the Idolator Lord command trait. So you need to have that as your command trait if you want to be able to give your cultists a mark. So if you want to lean in on all these amazing abilities within the book on your cultists, you have to take Idolator Lord. And not only do you get that ability, the fact you can make something a priest is just so beneficial, whether that's for curse, for heal, guidance, etc. But
Stopping
also,
Fire Slayers and Daughters of Cain with
exactly,
their shenanigans.
exactly, it's so good. And just being able to like you say, get rid of that Heart of Fury, stop the Fire Slayers auto doing their grand strat. But equally, if you're running a load of knights and you curse a unit, if they weren't dead before, they're definitely dead now. But yeah, I think all the lists I've written so far, I basically have an Idolator Lord over Master of Magic. So
Yeah,
I think it's a refreshing change.
I've got an Idolator Lord as well. Even just getting the ability to go priest and getting some priest access is very handy. I tried to do a Demon Prince General, and I'm like, oh, you know, bolstered by chaos plus 2 wounds is okay. I love that it becomes a monster. I really like that. But like,
Yeah.
I'm struggling a little bit. I'm like, oh, do I want a Demon Prince? And I think Idolator Lord is too strong. Even Arch Sorcerer getting the access to the entire spell lore are probably my favorites.
Yeah, no, I like that one, particularly if you do take the big bad boy Arcane Tome. So you get the additional spell cast. But yeah, I just think Idolator Lord is by far the standout. Like you say, the utility it gives you, and I think it's really cool that slaves are having the ability to just make someone a priest. There's not a lot of that in any of the other books. So I really like it, and it's another reason why you may stay away from the War Shrine because you've got that priest access.
Yeah. Another call out as well is that a lot of the cultists did get a glow up. There's some interesting little change, not just Splintered Fang. There's a lot of cool things like Corvus Cavol. You
The
can't target
Unmade.
them. Yeah, the Unmade. There's a lot of cool little tricks in there. It's like previously it was like the Untamed Beasts and your Iron Golems were like the two cultists you'd always pick. Now I'm looking through the range going, okay, I like that. I like that. I could definitely see uses of multiple of the cults.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think that's why, for me, the Idolator Lord, like I say, it allows you to lean in on the cultists, give them the chosen mark. I do agree with you. From previous book to current book, there will be some changes in the ones you pick, and I know myself and Toby have some different opinions on them, which is great for you because you've got another show coming up in a few days. So we're probably leaning on different things there. But yeah, like the Unmade, that no redeploy within 12 is just chef's kiss. Like really utilize that utility, particularly around Chosen. Chosen want to get close to you, and then piling that in with no redeploy means you can stay on that 8-inch charge rather than sitting just outside of 9 and trying to get in. So I think there's a lot of play around the new cultists, which is really exciting.
Very exciting. And it's hard because like when we get to host of the Ever Chosen, it's like, man, I just want to put all my points into knights and to warriors. But then I look
Yeah,
at the cultists, I'm like, oh, there's some good stuff as well. Like again, I feel like a kid at a candy store, which is helpful. But what about your artifacts? Yeah, I agree as well. Corvus Cavol, I never thought about them in a unit selection, and now I'm like, these actually a nice little unit. But artifacts, do you like any of these artifacts, or which are the ones that stand out to you the most?
Yeah, so I love two of them. One of them slightly more than the other. So I think Helm of the Oppressor is going to jump out to a lot of people. However, my opinion around it is the way some lists want to play, there isn't going to be anything left to rally. When you go in, you're gonna hit super hard. So I'm not sure how beneficial it will be. It'll definitely help you into certain things.
As a
Um,
Slaanesh player, I feel like I need it, but as a Corn player,
okay.
I'm like I don't need it.
Yeah, no, completely agree. It's yeah, I think in my Knights build, I just don't think I need it because I've got plus X attacks on all my mounts.
Are you
Um,
Corn marked or are you Slaanesh marked?
Corn marked at the moment to make the most of those allies. But yeah, I just think with the way my list works, I don't think I need the helm. I think it's definitely a case of you've got enough damage there that they shouldn't be allowed the opportunity to rally or potentially inspiring presence. Whereas
Mm.
Conqueror's Crown, for me, is the one I'm going to take, particularly for, like I alluded to earlier, rolling on that Eye of the Gods table by your opponent towing on that objective, and you just run on, get within 6, and just go, right, you don't count as anything. I've now got a free roll on the Eye of the Gods. Also putting that in with the heroic action because you're instantly going to take it. You roll your 3d6 and you shouldn't turn into a spawn. Um, I think that one for me, in my builds at the moment, is my most favourable one. And even in the mirror, right? If you're playing against a Slaves to Darkness mirror and they've got that big blob of warriors on an objective, you just go, cool. You don't count for anything.
I will say, I agree with you, by the way. The other ones that really stood out for me, and you tell me what you think, is the Helm of Eldritch Command. That was a really cool artifact because that is like the Disciples of Zinch, where Kairos, instead of dispelling an endless spell, gets to basically take it over. So if someone has a Purple Sun, Gnashing Jaws, Quicksilver Swords, any offensive predatory endless spell, you can literally take it over and sling it back to them, which can be quite powerful. And hey, it's a free endless spell you didn't pay for. And if I was going
Yeah.
to run a Demon Prince, I thought the Strike First, the Helm of Many Eyes. Basically, I'm a Helm fan. Anything that's a Helm right now, Helm of Eldritch Counts, a command.
Yeah.
Um, if you built like an offensive Demon Prince, Strike First can help.
Yeah, no, I agree. Particularly the Demon Prince. Like, if you're going all in on the Demon Prince build, and you've got the +2 wounds making it a monster, you then have a sub faction that even gets another 2 wounds on top, so you're +4 wounds, strike first. I think it's really powerful. The Helm of Eldritch Command. I do like the ability. If I had a wizard, I'm probably still going to hit my core rulebook up and go and get my additional spell. But I do like the fact you can do the Kairos thing of just gaining control, and particularly if they've got some pretty spicy endless spells. But I think it's a lot more situational, that one. So not all lists your opponent will have endless spells, whereas the other artifacts we've spoken about will inherently be beneficial across all games.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And, to Aragon, your point as well around some of the cultists, I agree. I think some people have just gone to these automatic, right? There's a couple that have really stood out, but Signs of the Flame, perfect example, is another unit where it's interesting, especially now that we know Gloomspite Gitz is going to be one of the next books. If they go into a very horde focus, and in the next General's Handbook, if we don't have GVs, Gladian Veterans, if we get back into zombie spam, if we get into Gloomspite spam, if Skaven start running lots of clan rats, absolutely things like Signs of the Flame could be a really good utility in your army, especially if you're not taking something like is it the Sorcerer Lord on Manticore that has that horde clearing spell? that could be a great way to resolve those types of attacks.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just exciting that there's so many options, and particularly at the back end of this GHB, we're really strong into it. So it'd be exciting to see what's happening with the new one. Like I'm assuming Galician veterans are going, which gives Splintered Fang even more of a glow up. Half the unit are on 25 mil bases, so I'm still fighting in 2 ranks. So it's going to be really good fun. I'm looking forward to hopefully it coming out in January, be legal for LVO, and get to run slaves for the first time competitively in the new book, which, yeah, super pumped for.
Spells. I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think the meta is going to shift a lot when the GV drops, but also at the same time, you got to remember the bonds of battle will likely drop as well. So thinking about ranges again, probably actually, there's probably one thing we didn't talk about with the Chaos Knights. One of the things that I love about Chaos Knights is now you can fight in 2 ranks. It's got essentially a bonds of battle where and I was talking to my mate Deke, who's a massive Blood Knight fan. And it's so hard to justify taking a unit of 10 Blood Knights because only half of them really attack. But with the Chaos Knights, you can essentially fight in 2 ranks. So if you take a unit of 10, which is a really tanky unit, all 10 can fight, which I think is glorious.
Yeah, no, that fight within half an inch on the turn you charge doubles your output. So it's a really cool ability. Again, with the plus, you change your lowest dice to a 4 as well. Your charges are not guaranteed because it's a dice game and statistics don't always work in your favor. But the odds of getting in is so high, and then knowing you can get all of them into combat, even without like all the corn buff pieces, you're 41 attacks on the charge with just your lances. So you should take off a lot of things with that, and you don't have to be too worried about how you pile in and trying to make sure everyone gets in. Yeah, really a really nice addition to their rulebook text. So
before we get into spells, Jeff's asked a good question, actually, Mez. Have we looked at the Cabalist Wizard Heroic Action Mutalith Vortex Beast combination? So I'll be honest, no. But I will say that I definitely have considered some of those, right? The Soul Grinder, the Slaughter Brute. I looked at the Slaughter Brute and went, this is actually not too bad. And the Vortex Beast, I'm not going Cabalists. My eyes are laser focused on Host because I love Chaos Warriors, and I still have my 6th edition original plastic Chaos Warriors from the olden days. So at the moment, my eyes are fixed on Host just because I love the aesthetic. But have you looked at Cabalist and what's the Vortex Beast do again?
I haven't looked at Cabalist. For me, going all in on the spell lore, I don't think is the strongest way this book wants to play, and I'm sure it'd be good fun for a lot of people, but I play the game for different reasons than the majority. I like to go with trying to play the most competitive build and trying to win tournaments with it, right? I think the Cabalists having all your heroes no spells is all well and good, but if you're investing in that, you then also need to be investing in endless spells, and it just gets really expensive for a spell lore, which I'm sure we'll talk about the spells in a minute. I think isn't the strongest that's out there in books at the moment. There's some spells that really jump out that I think you're just going to need for a lot of builds, but the other spells I just don't think you're gonna be using as much unless you're going in on like the Eye of the Gods or the one I have on all my wizards is Demonic Speed. So
Well, they're on screen now. They're on screen. So let's talk about them. So there
yeah,
is what, 6 spells, 5 spells. You've got Blinding Damnation, Spite Tongue Curse, Chaotic Conduit, Ruinous Vigor, and Demonic Speed. So
yeah,
again, are all 5 of them the same? Are there ones that you stand out? Like, what's your pecking order? How do you think about the spell lore? Because I looked at that. I'm like, there's some nice stuff.
yeah,
Definitely not enough for me to go all in on spell casting, but there is enough there where I'm like, yeah, I do at least want 1 or 2 casters to have
yeah,
access to these spells.
yeah. So for me, fundamentally, demonic speed is the standout. This game is all about movement and delivery. So the fact you can get a 3d6 charge on mounted units, including an Archeon. So you really are going to have to respect Archeon when you come up against him on a table, knowing he's got his 14-inch move and then potentially has the ability to 3d6 charge. Is going to strike a lot of fear into people, and they're gonna have to respect that distance they keep between you and them,
Yeah.
which they can't do forever. Um, as I said, I think the casting values changed in the FAQ they released as well, so it's now a 7 instead of a 6. But yeah, I think for me, I think in the 2 lists I've sent through, all my wizards know demonic speed. Like I
Yeah.
just need it to exist. Um, I then think Ruinous Vigor, particularly if you're running Archeon and you've got even more spellcasters, to have him always on top bracket would be quite powerful. His bracketing is quite big anyway, so I'm not too worried if he's lost 10 to 12 wounds. He still packs out a load of damage. So I'd rather, like I say, I'd rather have that than threat of the 3d6 charge to really like full send him across the whole board. Um, and then the other 3, I'm I'm not really taking unless I have no other options. The Chaos Conduit is a good, again, if you're really looking to roll on the Eye of the Gods, is the only reason I'll be taking it.
Mm.
Um, Split Tongue Curse, I don't think it's changed at all from the previous book. So it's flat 3 mortal wounds, which can be dealt back to you if it's unbound. With how strong a lot of spell casting is in the game at the moment, I'm not sure I want my wizards just having the potential to take 3 mortal wounds back. Binding Damnation is an interesting one because I had the cat for so long for the Strike Last ability, and now this is arguably just a better way of getting it. However, a 7 on casting without rerolls isn't the best. And again, it's the range is 12, and you can't teleport to get even closer. And I think,
All of all of the ranges are
yeah,
short. They're all 12. Like Jonathan called it out in the chat too. That's very interesting. Like having a range of 12 is very hard, especially if you're using things like demonic speed and your army's kind of running up the board or is stretched out. It is quite
yeah,
hard to be within range. And I wouldn't take spell portal just to increase the range, but it does make you think about how hard you go into the slave's spell range, spell lore.
yeah, no, completely agree. But I guess for me, slaves haven't always they aren't a spell heavy army anyway, so their spells are never going to be completely broken and have all this amazing spell lore. There's a great utility around it, and there's lots of differentiation between the spells. They're not all trying to do the same thing. You've got some that do damage. You've got some that make you fight better. You've got some that are movement related. You've then got strike last, and then the Eye of the Gods, which, like I say, could be quite good fun if you're just wanting to buff up another unit. It doesn't have to be cast onto a hero. So if you're wanting to roll multiple times for your chosen and make a unit of 10 chosen as tanky as possible, then I think it's quite a cool spell to have. But yeah, for me, demonic speed is my auto include.
Yeah, and like for me, who's running Slaanesh at the moment, I can do demonic speed for the 3d6, but I can also then get the War Shrine for another version of this. So if I want to throw up a unit of Chaos Warrior, not Chaos Warriors, 2 units of Knights, or a unit of Varangard and a unit of Knights, or a Chosen, and I could be tapping into that in addition to the run and charge mark as well. So it makes your threat potential incredibly. You can get anywhere on the board, which is it's great. But where I wanted to talk, Phil, I'm so excited about this part. So excited because this is the number one thing that got me into Slaves is the ensorcel banners. I talked about the old Warhammer Fantasy where I could put a banner on my knights. I could put banners on my units. I love this mechanic. I want to see a battle standard bearers come back in general. But ensorcelled banners, as I mentioned, Slaves to Darkness will always get one ensorcelled banner. Now, the ensorcelled banner must go onto a Chosen, a Warrior, or a Knight unit. In addition, you can get extra banners either from Host of the Everchosen gives you one, or if you go into a battalion that gives you an extra enhancement, you could choose that enhancement to be an ensorcelled banner. So there are multiple ways as getting banners, but it must be again on Warriors, Chosen, or Knights. And as I've already mentioned as well, you can't put 2 banners on the same unit, even if the unit had 2 standard bearer champion models. You just one banner. What are your thoughts on banners high level? What ones stand out for you? Is there any particular combinations you like, with the Chosen, Warriors, or Knights? Where are you at?
I love them. I think if you're taking additional enhancements, you're probably looking at banners before you look at anything else now. I at a top level, there's loads. I don't think any of them are bad, to be honest with you. I think they all have certain utilities. The Eye of the Gods one is probably the lowest ranked one I'd have.
Which one?
The Eye of the Gods one, for Undivided. So each time you get to roll on the Eye of the Gods table, you roll 2 dice instead of 1 and pick 1 for your roll with that unit. So that one I feel is really situational. So
The Blasphemous Icon I thought was the exact same as well, where
and that's for the priest. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, you subtract 1 from chant rolls from priests as long as they're not chaos. So obviously, again, it's going to be good against Fire Slayers, good against Daughters of Cain. There's a couple of armies that are
Seraphon.
yeah, but it's so
Yeah,
situational. You don't get a lot of priests in the game in general. I think that's like
yeah,
banner 4, banner 3. It's not my top.
yeah. So and then the other 4, and I know I've been pretty negative around Zinch. I think Zinch does pose its benefits, particularly as a Slates of Darkness army inherently has always suffered in the shooting meta. So if that shooting meta does roll back round, that 4-up ward against shooting could be really beneficial, particularly with the new Lumineth coming out with the mortal wounds. And I've always been pretty scared of long strikes, even in the units of 3, just for the double tap and shooting off key pieces or shooting off key units like Varangard. Obviously, you can't give Varangard the banner, but the new like hammer unit, you can protect that a lot better. However, there are 3 standouts, which yeah, the Nurgle unit, yeah,
Learn trade
eroding icon,
play, nailing it. Where every person who's read this has connected the dots to go 20 Nurgle Chaos Warriors with the eroding icon, and I think this is where the fun. Philip, you're going to tell me in a second, but the
yeah,
fun is when you start looking at the rules of the Ensorcel banner. In addition to what the mark of Nurgle or the mark of whatever you're doing, when you start to see those start to synergize, you're just like, holy shite, this is powerful.
yeah. It's quite frankly, it's ridiculous, and it needed to be nerfed before it came out, which shows you how strong it was, right? The fact that you're -1 to be wounded, so you're already at a huge benefit from not taking as much damage as you should anyway. To then reduce their rend by 1 on top of that is mental. you combine that with a Mystic Shield, you're essentially +2 to your save. And you're just going to have this 40 wounded blob of Nurgle warriors that are going to sit there and laugh at your opponent and go, what did you think you were doing when you charged me? Like,
Yeah.
I played against a friend the other week, and he had Marathi and an Incarnate, and my 20 warriors survived over 6 rounds of combat just from the banner being Nurgle and on top of that Mystic Shield. So there's some real cool combinations that are going to make that banner like pretty much be included in every Slaves of Darkness army.
Question on Mark of Nurgle for a second. So Mark of Nurgle subtract 1 from wound rolls that are going to target, which is great. And we've already seen the -1 to rend from the banner. And the FAQ, folks, is that it's not a 12-inch bubble. It's just the unit. So super durable anyway. Couple of thoughts here. First off, Jonathan making a joke here, run a unit of 30 warriors. Now, what are your thoughts? 30 Chaos Warriors, Nurgle marked, and the banner of Nurgle. Is that overkill?
For me, I think it's overkill. I think 30 is an awful lot in a game of objectives. It's also like it could slow down the rest of your army if you're having that as your front screen, and you've then got to run around this huge line of 30 warriors. I think the sweet spot is the 20.
And that was going to be my question, because I've seen some people actually discussing, because like 20 seems to be the sweet spot, but I wonder, is 10 enough? And outside, and I'm assuming outside of where the bounty hunter GV rubbish that hopefully should be over soon, but is 10 enough? Is 10 with the Mark of Nurgle and the banner enough, especially in host with a 5-up rally?
Yeah, so I have been playing a few lists where I've had 10, and I've not had them in host either. I've had them in Ravagers because I only get the access to the one banner. And you'll be surprised how long they stay around for, even as a 10-man unit. And if you're using them as that roadblock, which they're going to be used as to help to wait for you to be able to get all your hammer pieces in, you'll be surprised how long they hang around, even as 10 against your god characters like Marathi, because, like I say, no one likes to be -1 to wound. Like, the only way you're really getting there is either if you're on turn 4, I think, in Hagnar, or turn 3. And if you have the Triumph, and if not, you're going to be struggling to really take these guys off the table. And again, -1 rend, again, Mystic Shield on top of that. You've still got 20 wounds
all
you've got
that
to get
defense, put them on cover terrain. All of a sudden, it's like, and that was kind of my thinking was, was 10 enough? And I think Stefan mentioned perfectly here where Stefan said, look, it depends on the battle plan. Absolutely. When we're fighting over 8 objectives or 6 objectives, you might find 20 is too many and you can't spread your force out as much. But at the same time, if we're on like a battle plan with 1 or 3 objectives, then you're like trying to protect a home objective. 20 with the Nurgle banner and the Nurgle mark is almost like, don't bother, go somewhere else, which could actually work in your favor.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's all situational, and the Chaos armies have always lended themselves to as few as objectives as possible. I think with the new GHB, I'm hoping there's still only 1 that's 8 objectives, because I don't like having to spread my forces too thinly. But yeah, I think 10 is definitely viable, but for me, 20 is where I want to be at. I want this unit that's just going to hold you up the whole game, and really slow you down. So unless you have a retreat and charge, I know you're not going to be hitting the pieces you want to hit. I'm gonna force you into an unwinnable situation where you've got 40 wounds to get through with a 5-up mortal wound save, maybe oracular visions as well, and you're just going to sit there and do nothing.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. But I wanted to, again, the pendulum 10, 30, over, under. What are the others? Okay, Nurgle aside, we know Nurgle is great. We're going to have it as our anvil. What about our hammers, right? And we talked a little bit about Zinch as well. Slaanesh and Khorne. I like them both. I think Khorne is
Yeah,
definitely the stronger of the two, but Slaanesh is not that far behind.
yeah. I think, like I said earlier, um, at the moment people are going to be really Khorne focused because of the ally options. But Slaanesh, I think when that book comes out, will probably take over. Um, Getting that additional attack on the charge, knowing your unit's going to run and charge as well, is going to be super powerful, particularly on units like Chosen, where you're really reliant on the delivery of them. So, with the Chosen being able to run and charge, get the additional attack, so unit of 10 is going to have 41. 6 hit doing a mortal. It's gonna make them really scary. Particularly then if you, like I said earlier, you've got a war shrine, you give them levitate, so you're making them fly, charge 3d6, run and charge. The threat range is going to be huge and popping over screens. Like some people just won't be prepared for it at all. So yeah, I think for me the Slaanesh banner you will end up seeing quite a lot of, particularly on Chosen, I think. Whereas the Khorne banner, for me, I think is going to lean more into the Knights build. So the Khorne banner adding 1 to wound rolls innately. It's not even just on the turn they charge. It's just I'm always +1 to wound. And as I mentioned, being +1 to wound against anything is usually really difficult.
Yeah.
So they're just going to be super effective. Particularly like they hit on 4s, which Knights I'm not too worried about, like with how quick they are. So to then wound on 2s on top of that, I'm all right with. So I think, yeah, Nurgle and Khorne are the top 2. Slaanesh is only just behind them for me.
Yeah.
And I think Slaanesh will join them once the Blades of Khorne book changes the way it's worded its allies.
Agreed. Right now, Khorne is buffed only because of the allies that you can bring in, but we know there are 2 Chaos books coming, so we can only assume it's Khorne and Slaanesh that are going to be upgraded, unless there's a new Chaos book coming. Maybe they'll bring back Chaos Demons. Maybe they're taking it away from us, and like 40k, they've got their own codex. Fingers crossed. But I want to go to another point in a second, like Aragon mentioning as well. When you look at the Knights, and the Knights already are fast, if they're Slaanesh marked, it's almost like too much redundancy, because you can turn the lowest one of the dice rolls into a 4, so it's a minimum of 5. You add the mark of Slaanesh, that's now a minimum of 6. Then the run and charge, like, do you need all of this speed on a board that's shrunk? The answer is probably no. But when you think about that in a Chosen, I think that's the perfect delivery mechanism of Chosen, with the mark of Slaanesh, with the War Shrine, with the banner, whatever it might be. You can get some real speed and get them keeping up with the Chaos Knights, your Vanguard, your Archeon, whatever some of those other forces are going to be.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you. That the Chosen hit hard enough already, +1 to wound. I'm not too worried about on them, but getting them down the table is where they struggle. So I think Chosen will lean in on Slaanesh, and like you said, there are those pieces that are going to help with that. The War Shrine, as silly as it may sound, Unmade are going to help with that by stopping that redeploy as well. So there's a lot of really good utility with the Chosen around Slaanesh.
Have you noticed any good allies from Hedonites? Because I went looking for them, and there wasn't a lot of synergy because I was trying to find a way to avoid the, because I mentioned earlier, Khorne has the Blood Secretor, the Blood Stoker. I think the Juggernaut of Khorne as well has a nice little command ability that helps with us. But when I went on the other side of the fence, like there wasn't really a lot of internal synergies between Hedonites. I think maybe is it Dexessa or Sinessa? I think there might have been some little bit of stuff when it comes to like issuing commands, but other than that, I think it was just like independent stuff or Sigvold.
Yeah, so I did the exact same thing. As soon as the book came out, I went and looked at basically every scroll across the Chaos books to try and see what I could add in. Maggotkin, there was literally nothing. Zinch, I was wanting to do some shenanigans with Blue Scribes, and then GW like spoilt my thunder straight away by saying I didn't know the spell law, so it saved me 30 quid, didn't have to buy one of those. And then Slaanesh, from a synergistic point of view, nothing really. However, as you mentioned earlier, Sigvald and benefiting from the War Shrine, having a 3d6 charge, really strong. And then for me, Blissbarb Archers, giving the Slaves of Darkness book a bit of utility where it really struggles in the ranged game. So to be able to shoot off screens if you need to. I think a unit of 11 at most, get another one in, but I wouldn't be spending my whole 400 points of allies on getting as many Bliss Barbs as possible, because that's not the way the books have ever played. But situationally can be really beneficial to get rid of those screens.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was looking at Bliss Barb, Seekers, and the Archers. I thought there's some interesting play in there. There's a couple of things. I was looking like Sinessa and Dexessa, the two little mini keepers. I thought there were some interesting ideas, but when I'm looking at my 400 points of allies, Sigvold for 205 points is just a steal. It's just an absolute steal that I'm like, okay, I've got another 200 points at best that I want to spend on allies, because Sigvold is just one that I always want to have in my Slaanesh side.
Yeah, and on top of that, he's an amazing model. So why wouldn't you want him on the tabletop? So I picked mine up a few months ago, and he's now just been undercoated. So I'll get him ready to have a few test games, and yeah, see how brutal that 3d6 charge is going to be on people, particularly into Nurgle with no ward save, etc. It's gonna scare quite a few folks, I think.
I just think he's also a good counter to, again, incarnates, anything that's like very offensive, like pin a Gargant down, pin any of these like Iron Jaws or some big beastie type thing. He equally with his save ability is good defensive as well as an offensive play, and for 205 points, so it keeps a lot of points still in your army.
Yeah, absolute steal.
Yeah, it's a steal. Your damn legions. Without going into too much detail, you guys can read. Are there ones that stand out to you? And just FYI, the host of the Ever Chosen is a 5-up rally, not a 6-up rally. So just that's already been errated. So this is what's in print. Where do you stand on the damn legions? Are all 6 good? Are there ones that stand out more than others? I think we both agree that maybe 3 or 4 of them are probably the stronger ones.
Yeah. So for me, there's 2 that I've been building like strictly around, and that is host of the Ever Chosen. Obviously, that 5-up rally, double banner, really, like, you've got to have some plays if you're going to pass that up. What's really interesting is this used to be the one that was strictly Archeon, and now I don't think that's where you're going to see him. I think Host of the Ever Chosen is where you're going to see a lot of your knights, all your warriors builds, your chosen, etc. However, Archeon doesn't need to be there. Where you'll find Archeon now, I think it will be Ravagers. I think he's really going to lean in on his command ability to allow people to fight on death, and then the recycling of the units with heroic actions. Because being that long time Archeon player, Archeon's always struggled with getting bodies around him and playing the like objective game and having enough pieces to not be spread too thinly. And so in Ravagers, this really benefits him. So I've got like a more refined list that is a bit more balanced, and then I've got a list which is 2 big blobs of 30 splintered fang, and just going, well, you're going to kill me, but I'm probably going to know the future, and I've hit you first. I'll die on the bounce back, kill what you've killed, and then I'm going to put another 15 of them back on the table just with a heroic action, which all happens in the hero phase. So I get to move afterwards, then I get to charge you again, and we're just going to repeat this cycle of you're killing like 10-point models, and I'm going to be taking off some pretty big units with these cultists. So I think that really leans into where Archeon didn't used to be his strongest, which was bodies, and now he's going to have so many bodies to play with.
Yeah, because he doesn't need the War Shrine anymore. Like that was always the combination, right? You'd always have Archeon and the War Shrine. Now he's got the native 5-up ward plus the extra 5 wounds. That's extra points you can put into the cultists. And Jonathan mentioning Legion of the First Prince, and like I'm rereading Legion of the First Prince, and I look at that ability, right? Start a hero phase. I can choose an undivided. I can mess around with some marks. And I'm like, I just don't see it. And if the second part with the infernal servants, if I could have coalition demons, I'd feel different. But the fact they've got to be allied, and I'm restricted to 400 points of allied bloodletters, pink horrors, blah blah blah. To me, that is just like it's not enough for me to run the Legion. As much as I love my demons, I just
No,
I wish they kept the coalition side.
no, I completely agree with you. I think it doesn't have the tricks that it wants to have or used to have, and you're really taking it for just playing around with that. I believe it's the one unit you can flip its mark each turn, and I don't see how that outweighs a 5-up rally or additional banner, etc. So for me, Legion is one that's right down the bottom of my pecking order.
I don't mind despoilers, like adding 2 wounds to a despoiler monster. So if I'm going to run, a sorcerer lord on Manticore or a chaos lord on Manticore, and maybe I'm going to do soul grinder or some type of I don't mind despoiler, but I think it's just Knights of the Empty Throne, host, Ravagers, even Cabalist to a degree probably have a little bit of a stronger builds. But hey, if the next general's handbook goes back to like a monster focus, maybe despoilers is a nice little play, because there is some nice things that have happened to the soul grinder. I remember looking at that going, oh, okay, I'm now reinterested in the soul grinder again.
Yeah, like despoilers, I think definitely has an option, particularly if you've got that Demon Prince general. So your Demon Prince becomes a monster, gets an additional 2 wounds. Same as Be'lakor, right? So Be'lakor can find a new home and get an additional 2 wounds this way, considering he doesn't have a ward save, but he's got a 4-up unmodifiable save. So I think despoilers could be his home now. I saw a comment just pop up about Archeon having 27 wounds in this.
No, it's
but
25. 25. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, in this one, 27. Like,
yeah,
nah.
it's just not worth it. Like those extra 2 wounds aren't needed. So I think you're better off in the other sub factions. I also saw one with Archeon again in Knights of the Empty Throne because it allows him to run and charge. Again, personally, I don't think you need to at the moment. Boards are so small that even starting 22 away from your opponent, that's an 8-inch charge off the bat without casting demonic speed. So
maybe potentially Linkers calling out Bellacor's lock to Legion the first print, so we can't even do that. So
Right.
potentially good call out there. But and Knights of the Empty Throne are decent, and we'll have Toby to talk about that in a couple of days' time. So I know Toby's a big fan of his Baron Guard. So
the
I think
Kotek goat, as he's known.
I think what I'm hearing from you is Host is good, Ravagers is good, Cabalist has some play, the spoilers, yeah, but is it as good as Host? Knights has some play. Legion is probably the one that I would use the least. I think it's just been nerfed too much.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like I said, the two that I really build around are Hosts and Ravagers. I think you've got to have a lot going on if you're going to look past those two.
We might need to see if Archeon is also locked. He might be locked. So, but either way, I think the concept is clear. Whether the rest of the monsters could, with the spoilers, get a couple of extra wounds. But I think we both agree, even if he wasn't locked, it's not worth putting Archeon into the spoilers. It's not worth it. Obviously, you can if you want to. Your battle line, I'm going to skip this really quickly. There's a lot of great options in battle line. Again, depends on GVs and what the new meta looks like. I think there's so many great options. I don't have an issue filling my battle line in this book. It's just not a thing.
Yeah, no, there's an awful lot.
I do like that, Ogoroid Theridans can be battle line if you want to build into that, like battle cattle type. You've still got your Varangard. And if you want to go Furies in Legion, awesome. That's great. Where do you stand on the Grand Strats and the battle tactics?
The Grand Strats, I'm probably not going to pick any. I think there's better book ones that are easier to achieve. However, battle tactics, there's definitely some that have their plays. The rolling of the Eye of the Gods one, again, leans into the list building with the crown and making units not count on objectives. So you've got potentially a guarantee in that one. You've got the killer priest or totem, really strong, again, situational, but to have any other battle tactic that allows you just to kill a singular model can be quite beneficial. The charge with 3 or more units, if you're going that cav heavy and you're right down the table and you've got the double turn, you'd be pretty unlucky to roll a few 3-inch charges, I think. So there's definitely a lot of options in here. However, I wouldn't pick the grand strat that is do 4 of the battle tactics below.
I was gonna say, just imagine we go into the next GBH and they're trash, or let's say there's no grand strategies at all. I think there might come a time where everyone's got grand strategies and battle tactics that maybe they'll reduce a lot of the General's Handbook ones. If you had to pick a grand strat out of this list, which one would it be? Like for me, I think Dominating Presence is probably the one I'm going towards to get the having something in each of the quadrants.
Yeah, so for me, that would be the standout as well. However, you'd have to build your list to have that more achievable. I think a lot of the lists at the moment probably have 5 or 6 units, maybe 7. So to know you've got to keep 4 of them alive isn't going to be that straightforward. So it's not like the book one where you can just have that one unit in the middle of the board hitting all 4 table quarters. I believe you specifically need 1 in each.
Yeah.
So, it would be that one. That was the one we were potentially having for Team England at Six Nations this weekend, just to free up other grand strats or other people. However, it turned out that we were allowed to get in the one where I just needed that 1 unit in all 4 quarters.
The other one that stands out for me, like if I'm not going to do Dominating Presence, is probably Master of the Dark Ritual, but it's still risky, right? Like, do I want to take a Slaves to Darkness Endless spell? Am I going to keep it around for the 5 rounds? And is it going to stop me? Like what happens if my opponent at the bottom of turn 5 unbinds it? Like, there goes my. It's too risky for me, which is why Dominating Presence was probably my favorite of the four.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like ones where potentially your opponents can't just completely stop with one thing they can do. Obviously, they can kill your units to stop you doing it, but they've got to engage you. Whereas one where you can't interact with them to help them deny it, I'm not a huge fan of. And particularly again, you've got to have an endless spell, and it's extra points that I probably don't want to be spending.
Yeah. That's. I think we're both on the same page. Do you like any of these core battalions? I mean, if you go on Varangard, this is one of them is a Toby one. So like Varangard, Happy Days, do the Overlords of Chaos. When I was looking at the Chaos Warband, I'm like, it's not bad. I just don't think the benefits were strong enough. Like Unified or Slayer, I'm like, I'd rather Warlord or Battle Reg or Magnificent or something, like Command Entourage. Sorry.
Yeah, so for me, I'm not picking the core battalions. I'm a strictly battle reg only with Archeon, because you need to really utilize that knowing the future. So to be able to win the roll off and just choose to go second, um, I I can't pass that up ever. I know a lot of people this year have done bounty hunters, but um, I, it always baffles me. And then the other builds, I think you're looking at additional artifacts. So if you're going Command Entourage or Warlord, but yeah, these two war bands, I don't think you're going to get that many Chaos Warrior units in there. And I'll let Toby tell you about Varangard, but that's a lot of Varangard that you're going to need to take.
Yeah, my current list has 2 units of Varangard, so it's not enough to go into Overlords of Chaos. And you'll notice that the Chaos Warband says that you've got to have up to four units of Slaves to Darkness units that are not Behemoth, not Varangard, and like it's just for me, that one's too restrictive, and I think I'd rather just get a third banner, to be honest, if I'm gonna if that's what I want, or I'm gonna go another spell or another artifact.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the core battalions within the GHP are far better than these ones.
I like the Chaos Warband. If I scaled back my Varangard and I went more Knights or more Chosen, I could see some use with the Chaos Warband. Yeah, and I think Aragon, Chaos Warband is okay when you're going MSU, but you probably still find yourself having at least 2 drops. So
Yeah.
I guess it depends on where you're going, but I know where you're going, and that is one of your 2 lists. So to give us a bit of, there's so much in this book, right? We have scratched the surface with units and talked about some of the things we like and some of the things we don't like, but again, it took me 2 hours to go through all of the rule changes in the book. You've started to put this into theory, right? Like where is Phil thinking about from a list perspective? And you've provided 2 lists. So the first one here is the host of the Ever Chosen. You've gone No Place for the Weak and Indomitable for your Triumph. You've got yourself a Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount. We do a whole bunch of beautiful things. You got the Chaos Lord. So you got 2 Sorcerer Lords. You've got yourself a unit of 2 units of Chaos Knights, a unit of 20 Chaos Warriors, a Blood Secretor and a Blood Stoker, both being allies from the Blades of Khorne, wrapped up in a Bounty Hunter and a Warlord for the extra artifact. So maybe talk to me a little bit about how does this work? What is it doing? Why have you chosen what you've chosen? Like, give me a bit of an idea of what's going on here.
Yeah, so for me, this is the list. If I had a tournament this weekend, this is what I'd run. I feel that it does everything that I want to do. It hits really, really hard. I've played a lot of games of it and have been quite surprised by the way it deals its damage, whilst being extremely survivable. So I'll be totally honest, it's all centered around the Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount's ability. And if I had another 50 points to play with, that would be a Karkadrak. So the ability that it has is that strike first ability on the turn it charges, and then I get to pick a unit of 10 knights wholly within 12. Well, a unit of knights wholly within 12. It just so happens I have 10 of them. And then they get to immediately fight. And then on top of that, I get to then do the first activation in the combat phase, which is another unit of 10 knights probably. So I should be hitting my opponent with my Chaos Lord and 20 knights before they get to interact with me. It's all then designed around the banner having the +1 to wound means I'll be charging a flank where there probably isn't a monster to roar me, so I can guarantee I get my all-out attack, and so I can be freeze and twos. Then I have my Sorcerer Lord that I've got Arcane Tome on one of them because I do really want to be casting 3 spells. I want to be casting Mystic Shield, Demonic Speed, and Demonic Power. So Demonic Power has changed in this book, and it's now +1 to hit and +1 to wound. And that will be being cast on my other 10 knights, which don't have the banner, so they will hit exactly the same as the ones that do, and they can go towards where the monsters are that might roar them, etc. So I'll consistently be on freeze. So those 2 units are already really punchy without the next 2 pieces, which are the Bloodsecrator and the Bloodstoker. I think I sent you the wrong points to the Bloodstoker. He's only 80 instead of 120.
I was gonna say because I remember when I was building my list, and those 2 in total become 205, and then when you bring Siggy in, Sigvold is 205 as well. So it's easy for me at the moment to switch between the 2, and I can have the exact same list, but just swap out those 2 allies. But either way, you're still under points.
Exactly.
What do those 2 do? Given like they're beasts of chaos, they're blades of corn. So if I haven't looked at blades of corn, like where's the current synergy work with these 2? Current, I underline that, put it in bold because it's on borrowed time.
Oh, exactly. So like I said, I'm gonna be using and abusing this until it changes. So the Bloodsecrator has an ability which has a aura wholly within 16 that allows for +1 attack for corn units, not blades of corn, just corn. So I get the benefit from that across all my models except my Sorcerer Lords and my Warriors. So I'm looking at then on the charge, my Chaos Knights would be 5 attacks each. So I'm 51 attacks with that unit of 10. And then the Bloodstoker gives you aura again, wholly within 8, but this time it's +3 to run and charge, and reroll all wound rolls. So again, utility around it is it's strictly corn. So what you're looking to do is the unit that you probably don't have demonic speed off on, you're giving them the +3 to their charge. So you're then charging 2d6 +3, charging the lowest dice to a 4, and you're trying to really utilize the mechanics around getting all 3 of these pieces into combat. So you've got those 3 real hammer units going down the corn route and really utilizing the abilities of the allies. And then we've got that 20 blobber warriors we've talked about. So this list, I believe, is an 8-drop. So there's no guarantee that I'll be going first. I think your opponent's going to have to deploy quite well if they're going to give you first turn, because if they're going to sit right on the edge of 18, I'm more than happy to full send this into someone's army.
This is the type of list that if you're given first, you've got the threat range to go aggressive. But if you're given second, you've got some durability that you don't mind. The only thing I want to call out is obviously is that the Bloodsecrator will force you to re-roll your successful casts within 16. So you just have to be mindful of where your Sorcerer Lords are, especially if you're trying to pull off like demonic speed.
Yeah, so what I tend to do, he will be my last drop usually, so I can see where I need to hit people. So I usually will deploy with knights on either flank, but wholly within 12 of both wizards. And then my Blood Secretor will be exactly 16.1 away from my wizards because I don't want to be re-rolling any of my spells. Like to successfully cast a 7 and then have to re-roll it anyway. Yeah, I've got no time to be doing that. So it does come down to deployment and just knowing your ranges, which inherently I will pre-measure and just make sure I can get my blood secretor away from that. And then his aura is quite big, so if you run him down the table, you can probably hit quite a few enemy wizards turn 1 as well. So I've played against Lumineth with him, and he's been like MVP just by going, can you re-roll that, please? Especially Total Eclipse, because I hate that spell. And then, yeah, so it just comes down to knowing what your army does and just knowing your ranges and keeping them outside. Like, this is something you can control. I've just seen someone say, why Indomitable? And
yeah. Why the triumph is Indomitable instead of Inspired or something else?
So correct me if I'm wrong, but is Indomitable plus, is that auto pass or is it, or I'm trying to remember.
They've changed so much.
So I think I've gone for the.
What do you want, mate?
I think I'm going the Inspiring Presence one, because there's so much in the game that can just force you to run away. Yeah, it's been a long few days for me, so I've probably made a mistake if that's not the right one.
It's all right.
So, yeah, I don't feel you need the +1 to wound when you've got the utility to do that anyway. I don't really need the re-rollable charges. The fact that there isn't any battle shock immunity in here, I think just having it once would be quite beneficial. And at 1975, you've got a good chance of getting your triumph, but not guaranteed.
Well, your list should be a little bit cheaper as well because I think you've overcosted the Blood Secretor or the Blood Stoker. But the other consideration as well is there's a lot more armies now coming out with no Inspiring Presence. You know, Mega Gargants can shut off Inspiring Presence. Daughters of Cain have an ability shut off Inspiring Presence. So having something like a Triumph to stop battle shock that is an Inspiring Presence actually isn't a bad card to have up your sleeve, especially with those 20 Chaos Warriors that if you find yourself, you know, super durable but running from battle shock, it's nice just to have up your sleeve.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Anything else you call out on this list, or do you want to go to your second one? I mean, Host of the Ever-Chosen, as we've mentioned, you get a second Ensorcelled Banner, which is great. You get the 5-up rally on your Chaos Knights, your Chaos Warriors, your Varangard, and your Chosen. So really does lead you into like spending a lot of points, which is where you've reinforced all 3 of those Knight/Warrior units. And to Aragon's point as well, you know, even without Khorne, this is a strong list. And if you don't want to go into the Blood Secretor, Blood Stoker, you could make this a Slaanesh list, and it wouldn't change that much.
Exactly. That's what I've tried to do with a lot of my list building in this edition, to give me the flexibility to, once these pieces do change, I can adapt to that and not be heavily reliant, because essentially you probably look at trying to get another enhancement maybe and then get that 3rd banner in, and the other 10 knights become Slaanesh. So then you have 3 banners and you've got 10 knights. All 10 knights are getting +1 attack on the turns they charge. But yeah, trying to make sure I've got options for when things change. And yeah, the list is strong. It hits like a freight train. And even when the Blood Secretor's gone and you're outside of the range of the Blood Stoker, it is pretty oppressive.
Yeah, and there's some other good options from the ally pool. As I mentioned, I think it's a Juggernaut of Khorne as well as a nice little addition. There's a couple of little synergies, but just know that the Blades of Khorne will likely get War Scroll updates when these new books drop, which we know is coming probably in the next, say, 4 months. So don't go spending your dollary dues unless you've already got them. Or if you're like me, you paid $20 to get both the Blood Secretor and the Blood Stoker. But I wouldn't spend a lot of money to get those units. The second list you've given me is a Ravagers list, so a little bit different. You've got Archeon, the Ever Chosen, which is awesome. We want to see the big bad daddy with the Sorcerer Lord as well, Idolator Lord, Arcane Tome, blah, blah, blah. Now, you've gone a little bit harder on your Cultist, having 30 Splintered Fang, 2 units of Untamed Beasts, as well as that big hammer unit that is the Chaos Chosen. And I think when you start to reinforce things, you'll notice how quickly your points go up. There's 1/4 of your army in the chosen unit alone, let alone what Archeon's doing as well. So you do find your points disappear quickly.
Yeah, so this list is quite different to the first one. It's a lot more bodies, a lot more presence on the table. I didn't want to be that guy that just sent you a list that just had all Splintered Fang on it, so I thought I'd give you something a little bit different.
Nice.
So, again, you would like Master of Magic on your Sorcerer Lord, but you have to take the Idolator Lord to give your Splintered Fang that Mark of Slaanesh to give them run and charge. The biggest issue with them is the delivery for them. So the fact that you can go auto 6 them down the tables and then movement 12 and then get the charge off the back of that as well can be super impactful. I still think Untamed Beasts are incredible. That's keeping their pre-game move. It really helps you into certain Alpha Strike armies that are going to look to get into you turn 1, particularly as this list will inherently look to give the turn away. So you can help screen out your pieces. The 10 chosen for me, they're going to work as both the hammer and the anvil of this army. They're going to do the exact same job. I've put them in Nurgle just because I'm not rallying on the 5-up, so I need that survivability. They don't have the inbuilt 5-up mortal wound save like your knights and your warriors have, so I'll be looking to get my oracular onto them, and hopefully I'll roll a 6 on the Eye of the Gods to make them Rend 2 to give them the even more of a punch that they don't need.
And this list is quite light on bodies, but the Ravager's ability allows you to recycle units. So, if you're thinking about this going, there's only 6 units on the table, the ability to to be recycling some of these cultist units, all of a sudden means you're actually like 9-10 units as opposed to the 6. So, and yes, Aragon, you've mentioned, I expected 80 snakes. Again, I think 1, you're showcasing a few more of the cultist units, which is awesome. 2, I think we all agreed that Splinter Fang is a bit too good for their points, whether they'll get a rule change or a points increase. I do feel that they're on probably borrowed time for what they do.
Yeah, no, I do agree. And I also thought it'd probably be a bit of a boring way to talk about the list if I just went. So I've got Archeon, I've got a Sorcerer Lord, I've got 2 units of 30 Splintered Fang, and then I've got some screens. Whereas this is, like you say, showcasing some other bits of the book. So Chosen for 1, brand new models, super cool, hit like an absolute freight train. And then to even just be in Nurgle, you've got the other pieces people need to be worried about in this army. You've got the mortal wound output for those armor saves that you can't get through. So even with only having 30 Splintered Fang in the Mark of Slaanesh, you've got 96 attacks with that unit if you can get them all in. So you're averaging 16 mortal wounds on their first fight. You're probably forcing them to make another 40 armor saves with the fact that they wound on a 2-up. And then again with the Archeon ability to fight on death, but before that, knowing the turn sequence for that second turn. So inherently, I'm always going to roll it top of 1, but bottom of 1 if I'm going second, to try and work out if I'm doubling you. But again, it will also depend on how my opponent plays their first turn. If they sit back quite defensively, I'm not going to waste it. If they look to push and I think I can get a couple of pieces in turn 1, I'm going to use it. And then knowing that future can allow you to dictate where you want to fight. And you just won't put your Splintered Fang in a place where they can get roared. to stop Archeon using his command ability.
Can I just rewind that ability for a second? Because that was a ability that used to be on one of
Host
the
of the Ever-Chosen.
it used to be a sub faction rule that is now a war scroll ability, but it used to be once every turn. Now it's once per game. So for the folks at home who maybe haven't quite unpacked the Archeon war scroll yet, can you tell me like what is it and how does it work?
So it's now, I believe it's the ability for the Arshurin. So essentially, you have this once per game ability where you will roll a dice in your hero phase, and on a 1 to 3, your opponent has to go first in the next battle round, and on a 4+, you have to go first. So it used to be you used to hide the dice from your opponent, and you could do it every turn. Now it's once per battle, and your opponent knows. So I don't think you're ever going to be using this ability when you're going first in the battle round, because you don't want to then be giving your opponent free information in the fact that they're potentially doubling you. Because a lot of people want to try and sit off a slave's army as long as possible because they know the output is quite frankly ridiculous when it gets to combat. So they're looking at trying to mitigate that as much as possible. So the ability to know you're doubling someone or know if you have the opportunity to is so powerful, and the fact that it's once per game now, I'm totally fine with. Do I wish it was every round again? Yes, yeah, I do. But I appreciate it's such a strong mechanic that changes the way in which the game is played. So to have it once only, it's still super strong.
And there's a caveat as well where if there's two Archeons on the table, so if it's a mirror match, it can't be used from memory. So if it's like that Spider-Man meme where you're pointing at each other, or the Battle of Undertakers, but outside of that, it's so powerful because it means you will know if you're being aggressive or if you need to be defensive. Like if you can't land the charge guaranteed, you may play conservative, move yourself onto objectives, how to manage your CP moving forward, because are you going second, are you going third? It is valuable. I think again it's a one-off ability. I think you've raised a really good point. Using it when you're going second in the turn can be quite powerful, as opposed to doing it at the top of the turn and giving your opponent a free information that you're going double means that they can be super aggressive and they can be maybe play a way they wouldn't normally play.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't think any player will ever use it that way. Like giving your opponent that information that they're getting the double, like it's so powerful, and that's why you take Archeon. You're taking him so that you know if you're doubling your opponent. And you're paying quite a lot of points for that privilege. Like that will be factored into his 860 points. And the other great thing about Archeon is you pick his mark at the beginning of the game, so you don't have to have the same mark for a whole event. You can see what you're playing against and be like, right, okay, so you're going to hit me like an absolute freight train, so I'm going to go Nurgle, and I've got damage output already, but now I'm going to be even more survivable. So with my 5-up ward, my 3-up save, my -1 to be wounded, you're going to have to be prepared to engage me for a while if you want to lift my Archeon off the table. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, like, I am conscious of time, and you have literally just flown back from America, and I would talk to you till the cows come home. But I'm thinking maybe like we start wrapping up. But given that you are the #1 Archeon fanboy, and you are what I've heard the fourth head on Drogar. Talk to me about Archeon. Talk to me about the way, because you've been using it for a long time. And I think, if anyone's going to be able to help me understand how to use essentially half of my army points in one model, when you look at this war scroll, what can you tell me as the key abilities that you draw upon? How do you use him? How do you make sure he doesn't die early on? How do you not waste him? So, like, how do you make the most of this essential 900 point unit? because he's got a lot of stuff, right? You've got the 4-up spell shrug, you got the the inspiring presence rally shutting off within 12. You've got 3 options from the monstrous rampage from the 3-headed titan, the 5-up ward. You deal, you've got so many rules here.
Yeah, so for me, Archeon fundamentally is still a huge piece in the army. Like you say, he's got so many abilities, but that no inspiring presence or rally now is essentially doubling the output of every piece of damage that you do. And with that, you're allowing certain armies that would normally pose you a threat, like Daughters of Cain and Bow Snakes, like with them rallying on a 4-up, they're now really gonna struggle to get all those pieces back. Beasts of Chaos are an army that, if you paired me into it against a good player right now with the old book, I'm pretty mortified with how well I need to play in order to get any result out of that game. But now the ability to shut off that really strong piece of a Beast of Chaos army or a Daughters of Cain army to rally on a 4 is huge. And that, along with knowing the turn sequence again, like I say, I'd pay 100 points plus on any army list to have the ability to know that turn priority once, particularly on a turn where you need it to happen to try and win a game. And then I think, sorry, yeah.
No, keep going. I'm gonna lead you to a couple of questions that I've kind of got, but finish off your thought.
Okay. I was just going to say, I think he now performs a much different role than what he did in the previous book. I used to use him as this big deterrent that would sit in really awkward places for my opponent, but mainly be there for my Vanguard to buff them to oblivion. And over the course of the games that I played, my Vanguard would win me games, and Archeon would look into the future without really having to engage as much. Whereas now he needs to be down that table in amongst the thick of it. So I'm looking forward to getting him on the tabletop still, and hopefully continuing to be known in the UK as the Archeon guy. So I'm really excited for that.
You are. All right, I'm gonna lead you to a couple of questions I got. So the melee profile is pretty good. He's got some good damage output, but he's only maximum Ren 2. So with Finest Hour, all that defense, Mystic Shield, blah blah blah. Like he's got good attacks, but it's just not good enough. Other than obviously Slayer of Kings.
Yeah.
Who do you prioritize as his combat focus? Do you go for the big monster? Are you going to go for the big troops that you can shut off inspiring presence? Are you going how do you use him in combat?
I'm going to be using him probably to fight the elite units. If I can raw them, I can stop a lot of their survivability, built in with that inspiring presence. And then, because he's going to be down the table, a lot of the time people use Finest Hour in your opponent's turn, so they're inherently going to waste it. Obviously, if I'm locked in combat with you already, then you've got the ability to pop it and try and survive through a turn. But I'm using Archeon and his ability with the Eye of Shirin, the Crown of Domination, to dictate where I'm going to fight. So because I know the turn sequencing that once per game, I'm going to go in, hit where I want to hit, which are going to be your elite hammer pieces, and I'm going to look to lift those with Archeon in hopefully one swing. I'm always going to have a Sorcerer Lord with him. Like the one spell I'm trying to get off is Demonic Power, so I'm mostly 2s and 2s. So yeah, I'm prioritizing elite units over big scary monsters. I've got other units in my army, such as the Splintered Fang, that they're going to go and hunt your big scary monster because I've got the mortal wound output from them. And if I spike, and I might just lift you.
Yeah, it's you're tempted to use the Slayer of Kings and try to auto delete that hero, but you're 100% right. I actually agree with you that going for those elite units, whether it is the dragons or fulminators, or going into something that will get you value of the attack profile, but also shutting off inspiring presence. That combination, because your hero general doesn't care about inspiring presence. Whoop de do. But those elite units that you're paying good value. And by the way, Saga of Dice, I'm actually disappointed as a Brit that you have been calling it the Eye of Ed Sheeran. So it is definitely the Eye of Ed Sheeran. I actually said that in my chat, and people are like, I don't know if you noticed, but you said Eye of Ed Sheeran. I'm like, yeah, that's what the rule is.
Yeah,
But talk to me more about the other rules, right? You got a double caster wizard here. Are there
yeah.
particular spells that you want him to cast? Is it like Mystic Shield, Arcane Bolt? Are you going for other spells? Like, what are the spells that you, in the ideal situation, you're going for?
So for me, because I've got my Sorcerer Lord with Arcane Tome, I'm predominantly using my Sorcerer Lord to cast Demonic Power and Demonic Speed. So that turn, I'll be proccing the heroic action to cast on 3d6 to make sure I get all of those off with the Sorcerer Lord. With Archeon, I then will be casting Mystic Shield as probably his most primary spell. Um, and then I do just have him as demonic speed as well, because your Sorcerer Lord is going to be such a key piece for your opponents to take out, that once you've lost that utility of demonic speed, you still want to be able to use it. It was the same in the old book. I'd have them both with Mask of Darkness, because you need the ability to get around the board as quick as possible, and that 3d6 charge really leans into that.
Do you think, from a War Master perspective, because he can be brought into Blades of Corn, Disciples of Zinch, Maggotkin of Nurgle, and Hedonites, do you think that's a worthwhile investment? Again, it's 900 odd points.
Um, I think only maybe in Blades of Corn. Um, in the others, I don't think so. He doesn't get to do the favored warlord ability in the other books either. So I think in Zinch, in Nurgle, even Slaanesh, I think you're better off getting in-book utilities out of it for the 860 points that you're putting in. In Corn, you can basically do it in this book anyway and get him buffed to the Oblivion. So, yeah, for me, I think his best home will always be in a pure Slaves of Darkness army.
He could be all right with Depravity. He could be all right in Hedonites of Slaanesh, but I think you're right. I think if you want something, you're probably unfortunately going in Incarnate, which I hate to say. Is there any keywords that you prefer more than others when it comes to the favored warlord? Again, Khorne, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, Nurgle, and Undivided.
So for me, it's Nurgle and Khorne. They're going to be the two that I'm going to flip the most between, because I either want him to be really fighty or I want him to be really tough. So again, situationally, it would be, can this army do the damage it needs to do to really threaten my Archeon? No, then I'll go Khorne, and I'm just going to look to hit even harder than I already do. And then if it's going to look to impose quite a threat, like dragons and fulminators, etc., then I'm going to go Nurgle, and I'm going to make you -1 to wound me to really minimize the amount of saves that I need to make.
Probably the final question with Archeon would be the three-headed Titan. Is there any? So we've already talked about, Roar. Roar is a great ability that's generic to everybody or every monster. But you got the three heads, right? You got Filth Spewer, Skull Gorger, and Spell Eater. By the way, I dislike that they've turned that into a monstrous rampage. I did like that as a hero ability, and I feel like you've lost a little bit because Slaves traditionally doesn't have a lot of monsters. So to do Titanic Jewel, Roar, Stomp, Smash to Rubble, and then these other three, it just
Yeah,
seems like you get one of seven where
yeah, I completely agree. I'm not too thrilled that it's a rampage. Um, they're going to have some really good endless spells for you to pass up roaring the stuff or what have you. But I don't think I'll ever really chance Skull Gorger, and just because you've got to roll over the wounds characteristic of the model. There's not a lot that Archeon won't just slap off the table anyway. Again, Filth Spewer, you get to roll 7 dice and on a 3-up do a mortal. But if you're into a horde unit, you're probably just killing them all anyway. And then Spell Eater is the only one that you might situationally use. Like if there's that endless spell that you just have to get rid of, like a Horrorghast or a Rune of Petrification, etc., then I'd probably use that. But yeah, I wish there was still a hero phase ability that allowed you to do certain aspects.
I will say what I like about Spell Eater in particular is not only do you eat an endless spell on a 2-up, but you also deal D3 mortal wounds to the caster. So that's not even a conditional thing, right? So if you just spell the endless spell, and the rumor, not confirmed, is that we might go into a sub-commander meta where there might be incentives for sub-commanders. So if there's a lot of little 5 wound, 6 wound idiots, and they're casting a bunch of endless spells, that could pop them, or that could at least put them to half their wounds. So it may get them to reconsider casting some of those endless spells. So that's probably my favorite of the 3. But I think to your point, Raw Stomp, Titanic Jewel are probably going to be ones that you'll choose probably more often than the 3 heads, which is a shame, which is a crime. It's a crime against Archeon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, like I say, should still be heroic phase abilities.
Even a heroic action actually wouldn't be too bad if it was a heroic action as opposed to a monstrous rampage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that could also be an option. Yeah, so yeah, raw for me is still the main one.
Yeah, especially if you're going into those elite units that you want to, 1, stop them from using all that defense, 2, make the most of that shutting down inspiring presence. So the more damage you can possibly do, the more likely to take battle shock, which means they're going to run, especially if they're like multi-wound, whether it's gluttons or some type of 3 wound, 4 wound. Hell, put it into Stormdrake Guard. That's disgusting. 7 wound dragons running away.
Yeah.
9 wounds. They're 9 wounds.
9.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly.
Phil, we could keep talking about this. I want to ask you maybe one final question, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. You can go back to bed. You've been an awesome guest, and I know as we go through this and you get more reps in with the new book, you're going to unlock a whole bunch of potential. I know Jeff talked a little bit about like the Mutilith Vortex Beast. There's so much good stuff that's going to be unlocked in this book, and it's like Cities of Sigmar, right? When Cities first dropped, because I was a part of Cities when it very first dropped. The list tech didn't really unravel until at least 6 months, where it's like, oh, we found some interesting list tech. We found some ideas. Yes, you've got some like low hanging fruit with the Splintered Fang and the 5-up rally and the Nurgle banner. But I think, as we've talked a lot about, Slaanesh, I think it hasn't been truly unlocked to its potential. I think Tzeentch is probably a little bit of a sleeper. We've kind of rubbished it and poo-pooed it a little bit, but I think there's some list tech that we haven't thought about just yet with Tzeentch, and maybe even some of the marks of the Undivided. And we haven't really talked about the War Queen. And I think there's some good stuff in the Dark Oath side of the book. There's a lot of good stuff in this book, and I guess it depends on what the GBH brings and the incentives and the army and the meta, and it's great to have a toolbox. I think that's the key. It's great to have a toolbox that you can respond to.
No, I completely agree with you. The book can lean any way as the meta shifts. And if we go into a shooting meta, then you need to utilize those Blissbarb archers. But yeah, it's really exciting, especially with a new GHB around the corner. Like, there's a lot we can kind of pre-plan for and get ready for the new edition of Slaves of Darkness. We're now going to be some of the biggest damage dealers in the game, opposed to being this army that you just don't kill. So it's exciting. It's going to lean to a new way of playing. and I'm looking forward to, like we said, using models that never saw the light of day in Knights, Warriors, Chaos Lords on Demonic Mounts, Karkadrax, Cultists. So yeah, really, really exciting.
So my last question to you then, my last question, and then we'll wrap it up, is what's the keys to success? If I'm a Slaves to Darkness player who's currently, I don't know, let's say a tournament average, I'm winning 2 games or 3 games out of my 5. Maybe I'm doing okay, but or maybe I'm picking this up for the first time. How do I get the most of my army, and how do I do well?
So I think what fundamentally people need to remember about Warhammer is that it's a game of movement. So you need to understand the general mechanics of the game, and remember you don't always need to kill stuff to win games of Warhammer. However, this army is gonna allude to the fact that you're gonna kill a lot of stuff while you're playing the game. It's gonna play, in my opinion, quite aggressively. It's gonna look to deal as much damage as physically possible. And God, my dog's going mental.
Sorry.
And yeah, you're gonna look to build around lists that are gonna look to pump out like a significant amount of damage. You can do it in multiple ways. You can do it with like all cav builds. If you want that pure foot slog of lots of bodies, you can go Warriors, Chosen, Cultists. So I'd say it really leans into new players as well. You've got a lot of survivability. The majority of your army is going to be sat on a free up save as a base, which is great. Like the Fat Warriors and Knights have both come down to a 3+ save is incredible. So I think for a new player, it's a really good spot to be joining the game as a Slaves to Darkness player as well. You've got the best of both worlds. You're going to be survivable. You're going to hit like a freight train. You're going to feel like you're in the game until the very end. So yeah, really good spot.
I think it's an exciting for list builders. I can imagine if I'm a new player, don't get overwhelmed. Don't get overwhelmed. Hey dog.
Yeah,
Don't try to
actually.
keep chasing. I think if you keep trying to chase and you keep trying to like, what's better, Chosen, Warriors, Varangard, and you'll be chasing the tail, and that's what happens in cities. You just got to stick and just like commit to something. And as you build up your army, you just get frustrated. I've noticed, especially what happens in Cities of Sigmar. But I think there's so much excitement from a list builder, right? Like, cockatrice, bring some cockatrice into the army. There's just so many cool pieces, and that to me, and like as much as I want to paint up my army like Slaanesh, I feel like the flexibility of just painting them black with gold or silver is probably going to be the most flexible, because then I can just jump between the different marks. And I think Jonathan mentioned earlier converting up some cool banners that might represent the ensorcelled banners. But there's a lot of cool things in here, and I'm excited to see where the new GHB goes, and then I can fully commit to go, right, where am I building into? What do I need? Do I need lots of units or small units? Do I want a couple of really powerful units? Do I want to have lots of board control? And that's where cultists come in. I think there's some really cool list tech that we haven't talked about, like the Gore-Beast Chariot or even the regular chariots. I think Gore-Beast Chariot's got some very interesting rules that I think people are sleeping on. And
yeah,
you just go through this book and it's like, I like this, I like this, I like this. I love the Dark Oath War Queen, and I love some of her abilities where it's like if you get into their side of the battlefield, she achieves her oath, and there's some crazy things. So whether you're competitive, whether you are narrative, whether you are just casual, there's something in here for you. And I dig that. I really dig that.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing. And like you say, the fact that from a list building perspective, you've got so many of these damn legions that you can pick from that are inherently good and lean you into various play styles is brilliant. Like you say, if you're either competitive or a casual player, there's something for you across the whole book. You're not subject to just taking the same core 7 units that we did in the previous book. If you wanted to be a competitive player, whereas now I think you're going to see a lot of competitive Chaos players playing a lot of different armies, which is really refreshing for the whole game of Age of Sigmar. So it'd be really cool to see and decipher what like my peers are doing within Slaves of Darkness and speaking to them and trying to get the most out of it.
Can I tell you something really funny? Everyone knows I've got like the biggest AOS Discord and it's great. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed both on Facebook and on the Discord is people basically in Stormcast wishing they were slaves. Because you look at the internal balance, right? If you look at like GW's Meta Watch and they show you like how many units in Stormcast get used, it's like 33% of their units actually get used on the table. This, I feel like there's going to be a lot higher internal balance when it comes to using units in the book. I think it won't get 100%, but we talked about it. You know, the cultists, there's a lot of interesting cultists. There's a lot of interesting ways of playing. So look, I said to you, we wrap this up, and I think we should wrap this up. Phil, is there anything you want to say? Any shout outs? Anyone that you want to, people want to find you? Where can they find you? I know you're on Twitter and your handle's below, unless Twitter blows up, in which case we'll find you somewhere else.
Not really. Just thank you very much for inviting me onto the show. I always love talking all things Slaves of Darkness. I guess I'll give a shout out to my club back home, which is Lance and Buckler. Joined them last year, and I've learned a lot about Warhammer in that time, which has enabled me to get onto Team England for this year, go to New Mexico to participate. What I will say to anyone, and there's probably people in the chat that have sent me messages on Twitter, reach out to me if you want any advice on Slaves of Darkness, and I'm more than happy to talk through it. I don't mind having calls, or if you just want to chat over Twitter DMs, then that's all well and good as well. So really excited. Really happy to be invited on here, and I'm looking forward to smashing face with new Slaves of Darkness in the next GHB.
I've heard some of your coaching has helped a certain Season of War player do well. So you know your stuff, and I think you've proven it. And again, we could keep talking, and you know, a couple of months time in the new GHB, and we kind of the dust has settled. Perhaps you come back and tell us a bit more about where you're at, and you've had some good practice now. But I think looking at Twitter, just seeing the response from the community of you doing really well at GW Open is just a testament to what a lovely chap you are. So Phil, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you've enjoyed it, leave a comment. You know what the deal is. Let me know what you're thinking about the book. How are you building your list? Is that stuff that we haven't spoken about? You know, we were only very light on Varangard, and I think there's a lot of list teching that we haven't really talked about. You know, the Centurion and the Legionnaire type stuff. There's so much in this book that we haven't only scratched the surface. So let me know legitimately in the comment. I'd be curious to hear how people are building, because I am building a Slaves army. I don't know where I want to go. I want warriors. I want knights. I want chosen. I want everything, but my wallet cannot afford everything. So you need to help me funnel this list. Otherwise, I'll be deeply in trouble. Phil, go hang out with your dog. Go back to bed. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who joined the stream. Let's play out the outro. Phil, thanks again.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would love it if you press like on the video, as well as left me a comment to let me know what your thoughts are. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the video description. I want to give a massive shout out as well to the AOS Coach Patreons and YouTube members who are going in, and the funds of supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you're all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1 on a redeploy.